Born in 1755 or possibly 1757 on the small Caribbean island of Nevis, Alexander Hamilton's early life was one marked by hardship and loss. Orphaned at a young age, he was raised by a mother who could not provide the stability and resources to support his education. Yet, it was this very adversity that ignited in him a drive and ambition that would carry him far beyond his humble beginnings. Arriving in New York City in 1772, he quickly immersed himself in the ferment of revolutionary thought that swept through the American colonies. As the American Revolution unfolded, Hamilton emerged as one of its most ardent supporters, offering his skills as a writer, soldier, and thinker. His contributions would help shape the nation's foundations, from his role in drafting the Federalist Papers to his service as the first Secretary of the Treasury. Throughout his life, Hamilton believed in a strong central government, one capable of unifying the new nation and fostering its economic and political stability. His vision for America was one of strength, self-reliance, and respect on the world stage. However, this vision was not without controversy, and his political battles would shape the course of American history. This journey will take us through Hamilton's remarkable life, from his rise from poverty to his lasting influence on the United States. As we walk through the chapters of his life, let us reflect on the choices, ideals, and challenges that shaped the early republic. Please take a moment to settle in. Feel free to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share where you're listening from. Let us begin as we quietly drift through the history of Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton's journey from the Caribbean to America marked the beginning of his transformation from a young orphan to a figure of national importance. After his mother's death and the challenges of growing up in poverty, Hamilton's thirst for knowledge became his driving force. His early education was spotty, primarily self-directed, but it was enough to ignite a fire within him for learning. He spent his days reading works on literature, history, and political theory. This intellectual curiosity, combined with his remarkable memory and analytical mind, would serve him throughout his life. At the age of 14, Hamilton began working for a trading firm in St. Croix, where he learned the practicalities of business and economics. His work in the merchant business also sharpened his writing skills, and he soon began composing thoughtful essays on local events. His writings caught the attention of the local community, particularly a group of influential men who recognized his potential. They arranged for him to leave St. Croix and pursue his education in America. In 1772, at the age of 17, Hamilton sailed to New York, leaving behind the life of an orphan and the Caribbean's harsh realities. His destination was King's College, now Columbia University, a prestigious institution in a city that was rapidly becoming the epicenter of colonial unrest. The arrival of Hamilton in New York coincided with a crucial period in American history: the growing tensions between the American colonies and Britain. The intellectual climate was ripe for the birth of revolutionary thought, and Hamilton was quickly swept into it. In New York, Hamilton faced another set of challenges. He was still a young man, unfamiliar with the ways of the mainland, and without the support of family or wealth. Yet his ambition and intellect soon earned him respect among the intellectuals and future revolutionaries. At King's College, Hamilton immersed himself in his studies, excelling in subjects such as philosophy, law, and political theory. Though his education at King's College was short-lived due to the outbreak of the American Revolution, it provided him with a foundational understanding of the ideas that would guide his future contributions to the nation's development. It was during his time in New York that Hamilton first became involved in the political debates of the time. He began writing pamphlets that criticized the British government and articulated the colonists' desire for independence. His writings, sharp and clear, demonstrated his ability to think critically and express his ideas in compelling ways. His words were not just theoretical, they were imbued with a sense of urgency, a call to action that resonated with those around him. Hamilton was quickly recognized for his eloquence and his commitment to the cause of liberty. Hamilton's intellectual development also included an immersion in the works of Enlightenment thinkers, particularly those advocating for republicanism and a strong centralized government. The works of John Locke, Montesquieu, and other philosophers provided him with the intellectual tools to argue for a government that could balance individual liberties with the need for a stable and prosperous nation. These ideas would influence his views on government throughout his life and become the foundation for his role as a statesman and founding father. By 1776, the Revolutionary War had begun, and Hamilton was no longer content to merely be an observer. He was ready to fight for the independence he had so ardently written about. He joined the Continental Army, enlisting as a captain of artillery. His leadership and ability to inspire others soon caught the attention of General George Washington, who made Hamilton his aide-de-camp. This position allowed Hamilton to be at the heart of the revolutionary effort, advising Washington and helping to shape military strategy. Though Hamilton had arrived in America just a few years earlier as a young man of modest means, he had quickly carved out a place for himself in the circles of revolutionary leaders. His education, though unconventional, had equipped him with the skills to navigate the political and intellectual currents of the time. His early years in New York had laid the groundwork for his later role as one of the most important figures in the creation of the United States. Hamilton's intellectual and practical education, his exposure to the revolutionary ideas of the time, and his rise to prominence in the military set the stage for his entry into the world of politics and government. The stage was now set for Hamilton's involvement in the formation of the new nation, where his ideas would be tested and his leadership would come to define the direction of the United States. From a young boy in the Caribbean to a revolutionary in New York, Hamilton's educational journey was one of transformation, and it was only the beginning of his remarkable life story. As the American colonies descended deeper into conflict with Great Britain, Alexander Hamilton found himself propelled into the heart of the struggle. Having arrived in New York only a few years earlier, he was no longer just an eager young intellectual, he was now a soldier, an advocate for independence, and a force of determination. The year 1776 marked the beginning of the Revolutionary War, and Hamilton, like so many of his peers, answered the call to arms. Hamilton's decision to join the Continental Army was rooted in his deep commitment to the cause of liberty and self-governance. He was not born into the privileges of wealth or a prominent family, but his intellect and ambition positioned him as an individual who could serve his country with more than just physical prowess. He could also serve with ideas, leadership, and innovation. At the age of 21, Hamilton enlisted as a captain of artillery. Despite his relative youth and limited military experience, his leadership abilities were quickly recognized. In an army made up mostly of volunteers with little formal training, Hamilton's education and quick thinking made him stand out. His analytical mind, honed through his years of self-study and intellectual immersion, was an asset on the battlefield. He understood the importance of strategy and was known for his ability to execute plans with precision and speed. As a captain, Hamilton saw action in several key battles early in the war, but it was his close relationship with General George Washington that would define his role in the Revolutionary War. Washington, impressed by Hamilton's intellect and decisiveness, appointed him as his aide-de-camp in 1777. This position allowed Hamilton to become one of the most influential figures in Washington's inner circle. Though Hamilton did not hold a formal command, he quickly became Washington's most trusted advisor, and their bond would shape much of Hamilton's later life. In his role as aide-de-camp, Hamilton was responsible for communicating orders, drafting correspondence, and managing key military operations. He also played a critical role in shaping Washington's military strategy, contributing to important decisions that influenced the course of the war. Hamilton's writings, including numerous letters and reports, offered valuable insight into the war's progress and the difficulties faced by the Continental Army. While Hamilton's military duties kept him engaged in the war's day-to-day operations, his mind was always focused on the broader goal of American independence. He understood that military victories alone would not secure the nation's future. The success of the revolution depended on the creation of a government that could effectively lead the new country. This foresight would later guide his efforts in shaping the financial and political systems of the United States. One of Hamilton's most notable military contributions came during the pivotal Battle of Yorktown in 1781. After several years of serving as Washington's aide-de-camp, Hamilton finally received a battlefield command. He led an assault on a British redoubt, and under his leadership, the Continental Army successfully captured the position. The victory at Yorktown, which effectively ended the war, marked the culmination of Hamilton's military service. Though the Battle of Yorktown was a defining moment in Hamilton's military career, it was also a turning point in his life. The successful siege not only helped bring about the end of the war, but it also solidified Hamilton's place as a central figure in the post-war political landscape. As the revolution drew to a close, Hamilton's vision for the future of the United States would take shape. He had seen firsthand the challenges faced by a nation at war, and he recognized that the country needed more than just military triumph. It needed a strong government, a stable economy, and a united people. Hamilton's time in the military was not without its challenges, however. The Continental Army faced severe shortages of supplies, lack of training, and internal divisions. Throughout the war, Hamilton grew disillusioned with the inefficiency and weakness of the Continental Congress. His frustration with the lack of coordination and support from the central government would become a key theme in his later political career. Hamilton believed that the new nation required a central authority that could effectively govern, and he would work tirelessly to create a system that could address these concerns. Throughout the Revolutionary War, Hamilton not only displayed bravery and leadership on the battlefield, but he also gained a deep understanding of the challenges of governance. His military service provided him with the unique opportunity to witness firsthand the shortcomings of the Articles of Confederation, the first governing document of the United States. As the war ended and the country turned its attention to rebuilding, Hamilton would advocate for a new system of government, one with a strong federal structure capable of securing the nation's future. Hamilton's experience during the Revolutionary War played a critical role in shaping his political philosophy. The war had shown him the need for a government that could unify the states, regulate commerce, and provide for the common defense. The weaknesses he had observed in the Continental Congress reinforced his belief that the United States needed a strong central government to overcome its vulnerabilities and build a lasting republic. As the war ended, Hamilton's military career transitioned into his political career. His service in the Revolution had earned him the respect of his peers, and he would soon be called upon to help shape the future of the United States. But even as he shifted from soldier to statesman, Hamilton remained focused on his vision of a strong and prosperous America, a vision that he had fought for during the Revolution and that he would continue to fight for in the years to come. As the Revolutionary War came to a close, the United States was faced with the difficult task of creating a new government. The Articles of Confederation, which had been adopted during the war, proved insufficient for the challenges of governing a new and rapidly expanding nation. The Confederation lacked a strong central authority, and the states operated with considerable independence, leading to inefficiencies and internal conflicts. The need for a stronger, more cohesive system of governance became clear. It was during this period of uncertainty that Alexander Hamilton's vision for the future of the country began to take shape. Hamilton, having seen firsthand the limitations of the Articles of Confederation, believed that the United States needed a new framework, one that would provide for a strong central government capable of regulating commerce, ensuring national defense, and addressing the needs of a growing and diverse population. In 1787, as the country faced the prospect of collapse due to economic instability and interstate discord, a constitutional convention was called in Philadelphia to draft a new governing document. Hamilton, at the age of 30, was among the delegates who gathered in the Pennsylvania State House to debate the future of the nation. He was not the most prominent orator at the convention, but his influence was felt in every corner of the room. Hamilton's beliefs were firmly grounded in the idea that a strong centralized government was necessary to preserve the Union and protect its citizens. He feared that without such a government the United States would succumb to anarchy, internal strife, or foreign domination. Hamilton's proposal for the new constitution was bold and ambitious. He envisioned a government with a powerful executive branch, a national bank, and a centralized financial system capable of managing the country's debt and regulating commerce. While Hamilton's ideas were not universally embraced, they formed the backbone of the debates that would ultimately shape the Constitution. The document that emerged from the Constitutional Convention was a compromise, a blend of various ideas and visions for the future of the nation. It provided for a federal government with separate branches of power, a system of checks and balances, and a constitution that would endure for generations to come. Hamilton's contributions to the drafting of the Constitution were crucial, particularly in his arguments for a strong executive and a robust central government. His voice echoed in the debates, urging his fellow delegates to consider the long-term stability of the country and to create a government that would be capable of navigating the challenges of the modern world. His belief in a powerful federal government was reflected in the final document, and the influence of his ideas would shape the course of American history. Once the Constitution was signed, Hamilton continued his advocacy for its ratification. Along with James Madison and John Jay, he wrote a series of essays known as the Federalist Papers, which sought to persuade the states to adopt the new Constitution. These essays outline the philosophical and practical reasons for a strong central government and address concerns about the balance of power between the federal government and the states. The Federalist Papers were widely read and debated, and they played a critical role in securing the ratification of the Constitution. Hamilton's writing in these papers was clear, persuasive, and deeply rooted in his vision for the country. He argued that a strong federal government would not only ensure national security, but also foster economic growth and stability. His words resonated with many Americans, and the Constitution was eventually ratified by the necessary states in 1788. With the Constitution in place, Hamilton turned his attention to the challenge of creating a functional government. In 1789, George Washington, the first President of the United States, appointed Hamilton as the first Secretary of the Treasury. This was a pivotal moment in Hamilton's life, as it gave him the authority to put his economic ideas into practice and lay the foundations for the nation's financial system. As Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton set to work immediately, seeking to stabilize the country's finances, create a national debt structure, and establish a national bank. His ideas were revolutionary, and they met with both fierce opposition and broad support. Hamilton believed that the government needed to assume the debts of the states in order to establish creditworthiness and demonstrate its financial stability. He also proposed the creation of a national bank which would regulate currency and manage government funds. Despite opposition from figures like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, Hamilton's vision for a strong, centralized financial system eventually became a reality. His efforts laid the groundwork for the modern American financial system, and his ideas continue to influence economic policy to this day. Hamilton's work as Secretary of the Treasury marked the beginning of his enduring influence on the United States government. He played a central role in shaping the country's financial and political systems, and his legacy as a visionary leader remains one of the most important aspects of his life's work. As the country began to establish itself under the new Constitution, Hamilton's influence continued to grow. He became a leader of the Federalist Party advocating for policies that promoted a strong central government and a vibrant economy. His vision for the United States was one of a powerful unified nation, one capable of competing on the world stage and ensuring the prosperity of its citizens. The founding of the new nation was not without its challenges, but Hamilton's contributions were instrumental in shaping the United States into a strong and resilient republic. Through his vision, his writings, and his work as Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton helped lay the foundations for the nation's future success. In 1789, after the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, President George Washington sought to establish a stable government that could weather the challenges of the new republic. As one of his first major appointments, Washington selected Alexander Hamilton as the first Secretary of the Treasury. This was a critical moment in Hamilton's life, and a pivotal moment in the history of the United States, for Hamilton's vision and policies would shape the country's financial future. At the time of Hamilton's appointment, the United States was in a precarious financial position. The Revolutionary War had left the country deeply in debt, with the newly formed government unable to meet its financial obligations. The country's economy was in disarray, and the public's confidence in the government's ability to manage its finances was low. The Articles of Confederation had proven ineffective in addressing these issues, and the new government needed a plan to establish its financial credibility and ensure economic stability. Hamilton, with his vast knowledge of economics and his experience as a soldier and statesman, was determined to create a financial system that could stabilize the young nation and promote its long-term growth. His vision was clear: a strong central government, a well-regulated financial system, and a national economy capable of competing with the European powers. To achieve these goals, Hamilton proposed a series of sweeping reforms, many of which were met with skepticism and resistance, particularly from those who feared centralization of power. One of Hamilton's first and most controversial proposals was the assumption of state debts. At the end of the Revolutionary War, the federal government and the individual states were deeply in debt. Many states, particularly the southern states, had already paid off a portion of their debts, while others, such as Massachusetts and New York, still owed large sums. Hamilton proposed that the federal government assume the entire national debt, including the state debts. This would give the new government the means to establish its credit and ensure that the country could borrow money in the future. The idea was divisive. Many southern states, which had already paid off their debts, resented the idea of helping to pay off the debts of northern states. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and other opponents argued that the national government should not assume the debts of individual states. However, Hamilton's argument was grounded in the belief that a strong national government needed to be seen as capable of managing the finances of the country. By assuming the debts, the government would gain the trust of both the public and international creditors. Hamilton's proposal ultimately passed, but only after a compromise was reached. In exchange for the assumption of state debts, Hamilton agreed to support the establishment of the nation's capital along the Potomac River between Maryland and Virginia. This compromise, known as the Compromise of 1790, helped to solidify the support for Hamilton's plan, and it was a key moment in the formation of the nation's political and financial system. Hamilton's second major proposal was the creation of a national bank. The Bank of the United States would serve as a central institution to manage the country's finances, regulate currency, and facilitate the country's economic development. The bank would also be responsible for issuing loans to the government and private individuals, and it would serve as a depository for government funds. Hamilton believed that a national bank was essential to creating a stable currency and to ensuring the country's financial future. The idea of a national bank was met with strong opposition from figures such as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, who argued that the Constitution did not give the federal government the authority to create such an institution. Hamilton, however, argued that the creation of the bank was an implied power granted by the Constitution under the necessary and proper clause. He believed that the national bank was necessary to fulfill the government's responsibilities and that it would help the country maintain financial stability and foster economic growth. Despite the opposition, Hamilton's vision for a national bank was realized in 1791, when Congress passed the Bank of the United States Act. The creation of the bank was one of Hamilton's most enduring achievements, and it played a critical role in stabilizing the nation's finances. The bank not only provided a means for the federal government to manage its debt, but it also helped to establish a uniform national currency, which was essential for facilitating trade and commerce. Hamilton's financial reforms were not limited to the assumption of state debts and the creation of a national bank. He also worked to establish a national mint, which would be responsible for producing coins and regulating the country's money supply. In addition, he proposed a system of tariffs and excise taxes to generate revenue for the government. These measures were designed to create a stable and self-sustaining financial system that would support the growth and development of the United States. Hamilton's financial policies were rooted in his vision for the future of the United States. He believed that a strong and centralized government, supported by a sound financial system, was essential to the success of the new nation. He sought to create a government capable of promoting economic growth, ensuring national security, and fostering domestic and international confidence in the country's ability to manage its affairs. However, Hamilton's policies were not universally popular. His advocacy for a strong central government and his support for financial institutions such as the National Bank put him at odds with figures like Jefferson and Madison, who believed in a more decentralized government. The debates between Hamilton and his opponents over these issues would shape the early years of the American Republic and give rise to the first political parties in the United States. Despite the opposition, Hamilton's financial policies helped to stabilize the U.S. economy and laid the foundation for the country's economic growth. His efforts to establish a national financial system, create a national bank, and manage the country's debt were critical to the success of the young nation. His vision of a strong central government with a sound financial system continues to influence American economic policy to this day. Hamilton's time as Secretary of the Treasury marked a period of intense activity, during which he worked tirelessly to create a financial system that would serve as the bedrock of the United States' economic future. His vision was clear: to transform the young republic into a strong, stable, and prosperous nation, capable of standing on equal footing with the European powers. Hamilton's financial reforms, while controversial, were foundational in shaping the country's economic landscape. One of Hamilton's most significant achievements during his tenure was the establishment of a national debt structure. At the time of the American Revolution, the United States was deeply in debt. The war had drained the country's resources, and the government had borrowed heavily to finance the fight for independence. This debt, though substantial, presented an opportunity. Hamilton believed that managing the nation's debt in a responsible manner would enhance the country's creditworthiness and establish a solid foundation for future economic growth. Hamilton proposed a bold plan to assume both the national debt and the debts incurred by individual states during the Revolution. This plan, known as the Assumption Plan, was based on the idea that the federal government should take responsibility for the debt and thereby ensure the financial stability of the country. By consolidating the nation's debt, Hamilton believed the government could restore public confidence in its ability to manage its finances. The plan, however, was met with resistance, particularly from the southern states, which had already paid off a significant portion of their debts. The opposition argued that they should not be forced to help pay off the debts of the northern states. In a critical moment of political maneuvering, Hamilton brokered a compromise. In exchange for the federal government assuming the state debts, the national capital would be moved to a location along the Potomac River, a decision that placated Southern interests. This agreement, known as the Compromise of 1790, allowed Hamilton's debt assumption plan to pass through Congress, securing the financial future of the nation. The national government now had the means to borrow money at favourable rates, and the United States was on its way to becoming a creditworthy nation. While the national debt was an essential element of Hamilton's plan, he also understood the importance of creating a stable currency. One of his next goals was to establish a national bank, which would serve as a depository for government funds and a regulator of currency. In 1791, Hamilton's vision was realized when Congress passed the Bank of the United States Act, creating the first national bank in the country's history. The Bank of the United States was a central institution that would hold government deposits, issue currency, and facilitate loans. It was designed to help stabilize the economy by providing a central repository for funds and ensuring the availability of credit for both the government and private enterprises. The bank would also play a crucial role in regulating the nation's money supply, preventing inflation and deflation, and fostering economic growth. It was an ambitious proposal, one that would centralize financial power in a way that had never been done before. However, the creation of the national bank was not without controversy. Opponents of the plan, led by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, argued that the Constitution did not grant the federal government the authority to create such an institution. Hamilton, however, believed that the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution gave the federal government the implied powers to take actions not specifically enumerated in the document. His legal argument, though contentious, ultimately prevailed, and the national bank was established. In addition to the national bank, Hamilton also worked to create a system of tariffs and excise taxes that would generate revenue for the federal government. He believed that a system of protective tariffs would encourage domestic manufacturing and reduce dependence on foreign goods. The tariffs would also provide a stable source of income for the government, which was essential for managing the nation's finances and paying off its debts. Hamilton's approach to taxation was pragmatic and designed to be efficient. He proposed an excise tax on whiskey, a move that would raise funds while encouraging people to consume domestically produced goods. While the tax was unpopular in certain areas, particularly in the western frontier, it was an essential part of Hamilton's plan to strengthen the financial system. These reforms, debt assumption, the creation of a national bank, tariffs, and excise taxes, formed the backbone of Hamilton's economic vision for the United States. His goal was to create a financial system that would support national growth, foster stability, and ensure that the United States could stand on its own in the global economy. Despite the controversy surrounding some of his proposals, Hamilton's vision was ultimately successful in providing the foundation for the nation's financial system. Hamilton's work also extended beyond the creation of the financial system to include the promotion of American manufacturing. He believed that the United States should become a self-sustaining nation, capable of producing the goods it needed rather than relying on foreign imports. In his report on manufactures, Hamilton laid out his vision for an industrialized America, arguing that a robust manufacturing sector would provide jobs, stimulate economic growth, and reduce the country's dependence on Britain and other foreign powers. This vision for a strong industrial economy was in stark contrast to the agrarian vision held by Jefferson and Madison, who believed that the United States should remain a nation of farmers. Though Hamilton's vision for American industry was not fully realized during his lifetime, his ideas laid the groundwork for the country's future economic development. The policies he put in place during his tenure as Secretary of the Treasury were instrumental in establishing the United States as a financial power and a growing industrial nation. Hamilton's financial system, with its emphasis on a strong central government, a stable currency, and economic growth through industry and commerce, became the foundation for the United States' future prosperity. His work in shaping the nation's financial system was perhaps his greatest achievement, and it continues to influence American economic policy to this day. By the late 1780s, Alexander Hamilton had cemented his position as one of the most influential figures in the early American Republic. His vision for a strong central government, a stable financial system, and a growing industrial economy had begun to take shape. Yet, despite his many successes, Hamilton faced significant opposition from figures who held a radically different view of America's future, chief among them Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson, who had been an influential leader during the Revolution and had authored the Declaration of Independence, believed in an agrarian vision for the United States. He saw the country as a collection of independent, self-sufficient farmers rather than an industrialized society. Jefferson's ideas stood in stark contrast to Hamilton's, and the two men quickly found themselves at odds, both politically and philosophically. The political battle between Hamilton and Jefferson was one of the defining conflicts of the early Republic. At its heart, it was a debate over the proper role of the federal government and how it should interact with the states and the people. Hamilton's vision called for a strong central government that could promote national unity and regulate economic activity, while Jefferson's vision was rooted in the idea of states' rights and a limited federal government. This ideological divide would form the basis for the development of the first political parties in the United States. The disagreement between Hamilton and Jefferson came to a head during Washington's presidency. Hamilton, as Secretary of the Treasury, was the architect of many of the federal policies that Jefferson opposed. Hamilton's economic programs, including the creation of a national bank, the assumption of state debts, and the establishment of a strong federal government, were seen by Jefferson and his allies as overreach. Jefferson argued that the federal government should have only the powers explicitly granted to it by the Constitution, and he believed that Hamilton's policies threatened the autonomy of the states. The conflict between the two men was not confined to the realm of abstract political philosophy. It had real-world consequences for the young republic. As Hamilton pushed for a stronger central government and a more powerful federal institution, Jefferson and his allies rallied against him, arguing that the country would be better off if power remained in the hands of the states and the people. The battle between these two visions was played out in the pages of newspapers, in speeches, and in the corridors of power. One of the most significant moments in this political struggle came in 1791, when Hamilton introduced his plan to create a national bank. Jefferson, along with James Madison, strongly opposed the bank, arguing that the Constitution did not grant the federal government the authority to create such an institution. Hamilton, however, argued that the bank was necessary for the country's financial stability, and he believed that the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution allowed the federal government to take actions not explicitly authorized by the document. The debate over the national bank was a turning point in the early years of the American Republic. The issue of implied powers versus enumerated powers became a central question in American political thought, one that would shape the future of the nation. Despite Jefferson's opposition, Hamilton's plan for the bank was ultimately approved by Congress in 1791, marking a significant victory for the Federalists and for Hamilton's vision of a strong central government. But the battle between Hamilton and Jefferson did not end with the bank's creation. Their conflict continued to play out in the years that followed, as each man sought to define the direction of the United States. Hamilton's Federalist Party championed a strong centralized government and an economy based on industry and commerce, while Jefferson's Democratic Republican Party advocated for a limited federal government and an agrarian economy based on farming. The personal animosity between Hamilton and Jefferson grew as well. Hamilton, who had been born in the Caribbean and rose to power through sheer intellect and determination, believed in the necessity of government leadership to guide the country through its early struggles. Jefferson, born into a Virginia plantation family, was more skeptical of centralized power and believed in the wisdom of the common people. The two men's differing backgrounds, philosophies, and ambitions fueled their rivalry. One of the most significant consequences of this political divide was the development of the first political parties in the United States. The Federalists, led by Hamilton, supported a strong national government, a strong economy, and a centralized financial system. The Democratic Republicans, led by Jefferson, supported a limited federal government, states' rights, and an agrarian vision of America. This party system would shape American politics for generations, and its roots can be traced directly to the battle between Hamilton and Jefferson. Hamilton's influence, though deeply felt, was not without its limits. As the years passed, the political tide began to shift. Jefferson and his allies gained ground, particularly in the 1796 election, when Jefferson became vice president under John Adams. By the time of the 1800 election, Jefferson's party had become the dominant political force in the United States, and Hamilton's Federalists were in decline. Despite his declining political fortunes, Hamilton remained deeply committed to his vision of a strong centralized government. Even in the face of political opposition, he continued to advocate for his policies, and he never fully reconciled with Jefferson's more limited vision. However, Hamilton's influence on American politics and governance was undeniable. His economic policies, his vision for a national bank, and his belief in the need for a strong central government became foundational principles in the development of the United States. Though Hamilton and Jefferson would never see eye to eye, their rivalry played a crucial role in shaping the future of the United States. The conflict between their competing visions for the nation set the stage for the development of American political thought, and it remains one of the most fascinating aspects of the nation's early history. As Alexander Hamilton worked tirelessly to shape the financial foundation of the new United States, he also understood the critical importance of foreign relations. A young nation struggling to assert its independence on the global stage, the United States faced numerous challenges in maintaining its sovereignty, securing its borders, and establishing diplomatic relationships with the great powers of Europe. Hamilton's approach to foreign policy was guided by his broader vision of a strong centralized government and a country that could stand on equal footing with European nations. The early years of the United States were marked by fragile relations with both Britain and France. The lingering effects of the Revolutionary War still loomed over American diplomacy, with Britain maintaining a strong presence in North America and continuing to exert its influence over trade. Meanwhile, the French Revolution, which had begun in 1789, raised both opportunities and risks for the United States. The French Revolution was seen by many in America as a continuation of the spirit of liberty that had fueled the American Revolution, but its violent turn also sparked fears of instability and foreign entanglements. Hamilton's primary concern in foreign policy was to protect the young republic from being drawn into the conflicts of Europe, particularly the wars between France and Britain. He believed that the United States needed to remain neutral and avoid getting entangled in European disputes. This view was in stark contrast to that of Thomas Jefferson, who, influenced by his admiration for the French Revolution, advocated for closer ties with France. Hamilton, however, was wary of France's increasingly radical turn, and feared that aligning too closely with the French might jeopardize American interests. One of the defining moments in Hamilton's approach to foreign policy came in 1793, when the French revolutionary government, having declared war on Britain, sought American support. President George Washington, with Hamilton's counsel, issued the Neutrality Proclamation, declaring that the United States would remain neutral in the conflict between France and Britain. This decision, though controversial, was one of the cornerstones of Hamilton's foreign policy. He believed that America's best interest lay in avoiding the kind of alliances that had entangled European nations in endless wars. The Neutrality Proclamation also reflected Hamilton's broader vision of a strong independent nation that could determine its own course without relying on the whims of foreign powers. He saw the United States as a country that could thrive through its own economic strength, rather than through alliances that could drag it into dangerous conflicts. Hamilton believed that the young republic needed time to grow, to establish its own identity, and to build the institutions that would ensure its survival. To him, foreign entanglements were a threat to this goal. In addition to the question of neutrality, Hamilton also sought to secure American interests through diplomacy. One of his most significant diplomatic achievements was his role in the negotiation of the Jay Treaty with Britain in 1794. The treaty was intended to resolve several outstanding issues from the Revolutionary War, including British interference with American trade and the presence of British troops in American territory. Hamilton, working behind the scenes, played a crucial role in shaping the terms of the treaty. The Jay Treaty was highly controversial, particularly among Jeffersonian Republicans who saw it as a capitulation to British interests. Hamilton, however, believed that the treaty was essential for maintaining peace with Britain, which remained a major trading partner and a powerful military force. By securing British recognition of American sovereignty and expanding trade opportunities, Hamilton hoped to solidify the nation's position in the global economy. Despite its success in averting war with Britain, the Jay Treaty led to political fallout and increased divisions between the Federalists, led by Hamilton, and the Democratic Republicans, led by Jefferson. Jefferson's faction viewed the treaty as a betrayal of American revolutionary ideals and a step toward closer ties with Britain. Hamilton, however, believed that the treaty was a pragmatic necessity for the young republic, and he was willing to sacrifice some ideological purity for the sake of national stability. At the same time, Hamilton's foreign policy vision also extended to relations with other powers, particularly Spain. Spain, which controlled vast territories in North America, including Louisiana and Florida, was a key player in the United States' western expansion. Hamilton was concerned with securing American access to the Mississippi River, a vital trade route, and preventing Spain from using its territory to limit American expansion. Through a series of diplomatic negotiations, Hamilton worked to secure favorable terms for the United States, including access to the Mississippi River and the establishment of new trade agreements. Hamilton's foreign policy was characterized by a sense of pragmatism and caution. While he was deeply committed to American independence, he understood that the country could not afford to engage in costly wars or make enemies of the great powers of Europe. Hamilton's vision for the United States was one of peace and stability, with the country free to focus on its internal development and economic growth. His policies were designed to keep the United States out of European conflicts, while ensuring that the country's interests were protected. Yet Hamilton's foreign policy was not without its critics. His pro-British stance, particularly in relation to the Jay Treaty, alienated many Americans who sympathized with France and its revolutionary ideals. Jefferson and his followers argued that Hamilton's policies aligned too closely with British interests and threatened the ideals of the American Revolution. Hamilton, in turn, believed that Jefferson's approach to foreign policy was naive and idealistic, putting the nation's security at risk. The divisions between Hamilton and Jefferson on foreign policy mirrored their broader political differences. Hamilton's vision of a strong, centralized government with a vibrant economy and a measured approach to international relations stood in contrast to Jefferson's belief in a more agrarian, decentralized republic with a greater emphasis on popular participation. These differences would continue to shape American politics long after Hamilton's time. But Hamilton's foreign policy legacy, characterized by pragmatism, neutrality, and an emphasis on national interest, would remain a guiding principle for future generations. As the United States emerged from the Revolutionary War, its government was still in its infancy, struggling to find its footing. While the nation was united in the cause of independence, the debate over how best to govern quickly led to divisions. These divisions, particularly between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, became the foundation for the rise of political parties in America, a phenomenon that had not been part of the original vision for the nation. Hamilton and Jefferson, despite both working for the public good, had vastly different visions for the future of the United States. Hamilton, a Federalist, believed in a strong central government, an industrial economy, and a close relationship with Britain. Jefferson, on the other hand, championed a more decentralized government, an agrarian economy based on farming, and a greater alliance with France. Their political rivalry, which had begun in the 1790s, would shape the political landscape of the United States for generations to come. The conflict between Hamilton and Jefferson played out most prominently in Washington's administration, where Hamilton served as the first Secretary of the Treasury and Jefferson was Secretary of State. Their ideological differences were made clear through their debates on economic policy, foreign relations, and the structure of government. The most significant of these debates was over the role of the federal government, with Hamilton advocating for a powerful central government and Jefferson pushing for a more limited federal government with greater power vested in the states. Hamilton's vision of a strong federal government was reflected in his economic policies, such as the creation of the national bank, the assumption of state debts, and the establishment of a national debt structure. These policies were designed to centralize power and create a unified economic system that could support a growing nation. Jefferson, however, believed that these policies would give too much power to the federal government and threaten the autonomy of the states. He feared that Hamilton's financial system would create an oligarchy of wealthy elites and undermine the democratic ideals on which the United States was founded. As these two men clashed over the direction of the country, their respective followers began to coalesce into organized political groups. Hamilton's supporters formed the Federalist Party, which advocated for a strong central government, a national bank, and close ties with Britain. The Federalists were largely composed of merchants, bankers, and industrialists, particularly in the North, who saw Hamilton's vision as the key to economic growth and national stability. Jefferson's supporters, on the other hand, formed the Democratic Republican Party, which advocated for states' rights, an agrarian economy, and stronger ties with France. The Democratic Republicans were supported by farmers, landowners, and those who were wary of centralized power. The rise of political parties was not something that was initially anticipated by the Founding Fathers. In fact, George Washington, in his farewell address, warned against the dangers of political parties, believing that they would create factionalism and divide the nation. However, the political divisions between Hamilton and Jefferson were too deep to be ignored, and the country soon found itself divided into two distinct camps. The 1796 presidential election was the first to feature organized political parties. The Federalists nominated John Adams, who had served as the second president of the United States, while the Democratic Republicans nominated Thomas Jefferson. The election was contentious, with both sides accusing each other of seeking to undermine the Republic. In the end, Adams won the presidency, and Jefferson, as the runner-up, became vice president. The election of 1800, however, was perhaps the most significant contest in the early history of the United States. The campaign was fiercely contested, with the Federalists and Democratic Republicans both vying for control of the presidency. Jefferson ultimately triumphed, defeating Adams in a bitterly contested race. His victory marked the first peaceful transfer of power between political parties in U.S. history and signaled the dominance of the Democratic Republicans over the Federalists. Hamilton's role in the rise of political parties cannot be overstated. His vision for a strong federal government, his economic policies, and his support for the National Bank laid the foundation for the Federalist Party. Despite his departure from public office after the election of 1796, Hamilton's influence continued to be felt in the country's political debates. However, the election of 1800 marked the decline of the Federalist Party and the rise of Jeffersonian ideals, which would dominate American politics for much of the 19th century. Hamilton's Federalists were eventually overshadowed by the Jeffersonian Democrats, who advocated for a more agrarian, decentralized government. The political battle between Hamilton and Jefferson, while largely ideological, also had practical consequences for the direction of the United States. The establishment of political parties, rooted in the differing visions of these two men, would be a defining feature of American democracy moving forward. The political divide between the Federalists and Democratic Republicans also gave rise to the first real political campaigns in U.S. history. The rise of political parties ushered in an era of organized political activity, where candidates would now engage in debates, advertisements, and mass mobilization to gain public support. While Hamilton was not directly involved in these later campaigns, his influence on the political system was profound. His advocacy for a strong central government and an industrial economy would continue to shape the country's policies and political debates for years to come. In the years after Hamilton's death, his vision of a strong federal government would continue to influence the development of American political thought. His support for a national bank and a centralized financial system, his belief in the importance of economic stability, and his commitment to a strong central government all played a crucial role in shaping the nation's future. While the political battles of his time were contentious, they ultimately paved the way for the growth and maturation of American democracy. The year 1800 marked a pivotal moment in American history, one that would test the strength and stability of the young republic. The presidential election of 1800 was not only a contest for political power, but a decisive event that shaped the future of the United States, setting the precedent for peaceful transitions of power in a democracy. It was also the culmination of years of political rivalry between two of the country's most influential figures, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. By this time, the United States had undergone significant change. The Federalist Party, led by Hamilton, had been in power for much of the country's early years. However, the Federalists' vision of a strong central government, supported by Hamilton's economic policies and international alliances, had alienated many Americans who feared the concentration of power. In contrast, the Democratic-Republican Party, led by Thomas Jefferson, had become increasingly popular, advocating for limited federal authority, states' rights, and an agrarian-based economy. The election of 1800, often referred to as the Revolution of 1800, was the first real test of the political system set in motion by the Constitution. The Federalists, under President John Adams, faced a serious challenge from Jefferson and his running mate Aaron Burr. The race was bitterly contested, with accusations, political maneuvering, and ideological battles dominating the campaign. Hamilton, despite his declining political influence, still held significant sway within the Federalist Party. As a staunch advocate for a strong central government, Hamilton was deeply concerned about the implications of a Jeffersonian presidency. He viewed Jefferson's vision for the United States, one rooted in agrarianism and states' rights, as dangerous for the stability of the nation. Yet, despite these concerns, Hamilton's opposition to Jefferson was complicated by his animosity toward John Adams. Although Hamilton and Jefferson had clashed politically for years, Hamilton's disdain for Adams led him to make an unexpected and controversial decision. Rather than fully supporting Adams' re-election, Hamilton engaged in a public campaign to rally Federalist support for Jefferson's opponent, Aaron Burr. Burr, who was running as Jefferson's vice presidential candidate, had once been an ally of Hamilton, but by this time their relationship had soured. Hamilton believed Burr to be an unprincipled opportunist, someone whose ambitions and lack of clear political ideology made him an unpredictable and dangerous leader. While Hamilton was a firm believer in the principles of the Federalist Party, he felt that a victory by Jefferson was less threatening than one by Burr, who he viewed as a man without a clear commitment to national stability. As the election unfolded, both Jefferson and Burr secured an equal number of electoral votes, leading to a deadlock in the Electoral College. The decision was now in the hands of the House of Representatives, where the Federalists held significant influence. The outcome was uncertain, and the nation watched with bated breath to see how the deadlock would be resolved. In the end, after several days of voting, Thomas Jefferson was elected the third President of the United States, defeating Burr after the House of Representatives cast its final ballots. The election of 1800 marked the first peaceful transfer of power between political parties in American history, solidifying the country's commitment to democratic principles. While Hamilton's influence had waned significantly by this time, the election of 1800 had profound implications for his legacy. His vision for a strong, centralized government with an active role in economic and international affairs was increasingly out of favor. The success of Jefferson and the Democratic-Republican Party was a clear repudiation of Hamilton's Federalist ideals, signaling the beginning of a new political era in America. Despite Hamilton's opposition to Jefferson, the latter's presidency would not completely abandon Hamilton's financial legacy. Jefferson, though philosophically opposed to Hamilton's vision of a strong federal government, realized that Hamilton's economic policies were crucial to the stability of the United States. Jefferson's administration retained many of the financial systems Hamilton had established, including the National Bank, and his policies would continue to build on the foundation that Hamilton had laid. Hamilton's influence on American politics, however, did not disappear with Jefferson's victory. Though he had died by the time Jefferson took office in 1801, Hamilton's vision for the nation continued to shape the direction of the country. His work in establishing a national bank, consolidating federal debt, and creating a financial system capable of supporting national growth remained integral to the functioning of the United States. Hamilton's ideas, though rejected in some areas, continued to resonate in the country's financial and political systems. The election of 1800 also set a crucial precedent for the future of American democracy. It demonstrated that despite fierce political rivalry and deep ideological divisions, the transfer of power between political parties could be achieved peacefully and without violence. The election also underscored the importance of the electoral system, which, despite its flaws and controversies, had functioned as a stabilizing force during a critical moment in American history. In many ways, the election of 1800 marked the beginning of the end for the Federalist Party. As Jefferson assumed the presidency, the Democratic Republicans gained dominance, and the vision of a more decentralized government took hold. Yet, Hamilton's legacy was not easily erased. His financial system, which has been the cornerstone of the country's early economic success, continued to influence American policy long after his death. Though Hamilton himself had been defeated politically, the principles he had fought for, fiscal stability, national unity and economic strength, remained integral to the United States' development. The election of 1800, with its contentious politics and ideological battles, was a defining moment in American history. It was a test of the nation's commitment to democracy, and it set the stage for the political evolution that would follow. Hamilton's role in shaping the country's financial system, however, continued to echo through the corridors of American power long after the political battles of the 1790s had subsided. By 1804, Alexander Hamilton had witnessed a profound transformation in the political landscape of the United States. After the election of 1800, in which Thomas Jefferson had successfully defeated the Federalist incumbent, John Adams, the political dominance of Hamilton's Federalist Party had waned. Yet, despite his diminished political influence, Hamilton remained an important figure in the country's ongoing debates. His vision of a strong central government, a stable economy, and a national identity continued to shape the nation's policies, but his direct involvement in politics had lessened. However, his role in shaping America's political future was far from over. In the years following Jefferson's election, Hamilton found himself embroiled in a bitter personal and political rivalry with none other than Aaron Burr, the vice president under Jefferson and the man who'd been Hamilton's opponent in the election of 1800. The conflict between Hamilton and Burr, which eventually culminated in one of the most famous duels in American history, was not rooted in a single event, but rather a series of political, personal, and ideological differences that had been brewing for years. Burr, a skilled politician and military officer, had long been a figure of ambition, but his methods and his political maneuvering had earned him the animosity of many, including Hamilton. Hamilton had been an outspoken critic of Burr throughout their careers. He viewed Burr as opportunistic, lacking a clear political philosophy, and most concerning of all, as a man willing to abandon his principles for personal gain. This was particularly evident in Burr's quest for the presidency in the election of 1800, where Hamilton believed Burr's ambition had led him to consider underhanded political deals. He was also wary of Burr's decision to run for governor of New York in 1804, a campaign that Hamilton feared would result in the consolidation of power in the hands of a man he considered dangerous. While Hamilton had always maintained a level of personal restraint in his public critiques of Burr, the political and personal tensions reached a breaking point in the months leading up to their infamous duel. Hamilton's opposition to Burr's political ambitions was well known in New York, and he made no secret of his disdain for Burr's character. It was at this moment that Hamilton made a public comment about Burr, stating that he would rather see the country ruined than allow Burr to succeed in his ambitions. Burr, enraged by Hamilton's remarks, felt that his honour had been insulted. For Burr, the duel was not just a matter of political disagreement, but a personal attack on his reputation. The insult was too great to ignore, and in the culture of the time, a duel was seen as the only proper way to resolve such a conflict. Burr challenged Hamilton to a duel, and Hamilton, despite his own personal reservations, agreed to the challenge. On the morning of July 11th, 1804, the two men met at Weehawken, New Jersey, across the Hudson River from New York City. The location was chosen because dueling was illegal in New York, but it was still allowed in New Jersey. The duel was set to take place at dawn, and the men, accompanied by their seconds, prepared for the confrontation. As the duel began, Hamilton, who had previously expressed his reluctance to participate in such a violent and final act, fired his pistol into the air, an apparent attempt to avoid hitting Burr. Hamilton's decision to deliberately miss is often seen as an act of restraint and a demonstration of his complex character. Whether he intended to lose the duel or simply wished to avoid causing serious harm is a matter of historical debate, but the result was clear. Burr, with his pistol aimed squarely at Hamilton, fired and struck him in the lower abdomen. The bullet ruptured Hamilton's internal organs and he was left mortally wounded. Hamilton was transported back to New York, where he died the following day, July 12th, 1804. His death sent shockwaves through the nation. The man who had been one of the most prominent figures in the early days of the Republic, who had laid the financial foundations for the United States and fought for a strong central government, had met his end in a senseless duel. His death was a tragic end to a life marked by ambition, controversy, and intellectual brilliance. Burr, who had killed Hamilton, was deeply affected by the incident, though his public reaction was one of defiance. He was later tried for murder in both New Jersey and New York, but was acquitted of all charges. Burr's political career, however, was irreparably damaged. The duel and his role in Hamilton's death effectively ended his influence in American politics. For Hamilton, the duel represented the culmination of a political and personal rivalry that had grown to define the latter part of his life. While his death was tragic, it also marked the final chapter in his struggle to shape the United States into the nation he had always envisioned. His belief in the importance of a strong central government, his economic policies, and his vision of a prosperous and stable America would live on, even as the nation moved away from his ideals in the years following his death. In the wake of Hamilton's death, the Federalist Party continued its decline, unable to recover from the loss of its most dynamic and influential leader. Jefferson's Democratic Republicans, who had opposed Hamilton's vision for the nation, would go on to dominate American politics for much of the 19th century. Yet, despite this political shift, Hamilton's legacy endured. His ideas about the importance of a strong central government, his vision of a unified nation, and his economic policies continued to influence the development of the United States long after his death. Hamilton's passing also marked the end of an era in American politics, as his generation of founding fathers gave way to new leaders who would chart a different course for the nation. Though Hamilton's time in public life was short, his contributions to the American experiment were immense. His death, while tragic, did little to diminish the enduring impact of his work on the nation he helped to create. While Alexander Hamilton is often remembered for his contributions to the development of the United States, his personal life was also marked by complexity and drama. Hamilton, a man of immense intellectual and political ambition, was not immune to the personal struggles, relationships, and dilemmas that defined his era. Behind his public persona as a statesman and visionary, Hamilton's personal life revealed another side of his character, one filled with contradictions, passion, and turmoil. One of the most significant aspects of Hamilton's personal life was his marriage to Eliza Schuyler. Eliza, the daughter of a prominent New York family, was a woman of strong character, intelligence, and beauty. They married in 1780 when Hamilton was still a rising figure in American politics and military affairs. Their marriage was built on love and mutual respect, but it was also fraught with the pressures of Hamilton's political career and the strains of public life. Eliza stood by Hamilton through many challenges, including his struggles with political enemies and his eventual involvement in the infamous duel with Aaron Burr. Yet Hamilton's personal life was not without its complications. He had a well-known and publicized affair with Maria Reynolds, the wife of a New York merchant, which would become one of the most controversial episodes of his life. In 1791, while serving as the first Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton was blackmailed by Maria Reynolds' husband James Reynolds over the affair. In an attempt to protect his reputation and career, Hamilton confessed to the affair in a public pamphlet, hoping that it would bring an end to the scandal. The pamphlet, which was widely read, not only acknowledged Hamilton's infidelity, but also implicated him in a financial scandal involving his dealings with James Reynolds. This public admission of his affair and the financial mismanagement scandal severely damaged Hamilton's political career and reputation. Despite this setback, Hamilton's relationship with Eliza remained strong. Eliza chose to forgive Hamilton, standing by him through the fallout of the scandal. Their relationship endured through the years, and they had 8 children together. Eliza's support was essential to Hamilton's personal life and gave him the strength to continue his public service, despite the damage caused by the Reynolds affair. In many ways, Eliza became a stabilizing force for Hamilton, providing him with the emotional support he needed during turbulent times. Hamilton's family life also played a significant role in shaping his legacy. As a father, Hamilton was deeply devoted to his children. He took an active role in their upbringing, and his letters reveal a man who was concerned about the education and future of his children. Despite the political battles and personal challenges that consumed much of his life, Hamilton saw his family as a central source of fulfillment. His letters to Eliza, written during his many absences from home, are filled with expressions of love, and he often took time to reflect on the importance of family and the sacrifices he made for their well-being. Tragically, Hamilton's life was cut short before he could fully enjoy the fruits of his family life. After the duel with Aaron Burr, Hamilton's untimely death left Eliza to raise their children alone. In the years following his death, Eliza became a determined and resilient widow, dedicating herself to preserving Hamilton's legacy. She worked tirelessly to keep his memory alive, helping to secure his place in history as one of the founding fathers of the United States. In the decades that followed, Eliza's efforts to promote Hamilton's achievements, particularly his work in shaping the nation's financial system, would play a crucial role in ensuring that Hamilton's legacy endured. Hamilton's personal life, with its triumphs and tragedies, added layers of complexity to his character. His dedication to his family, his deeply personal struggles with infidelity, and his love for Eliza all contributed to the man he became. While Hamilton is often remembered for his public accomplishments, his private life reveals the human side of a man who, despite his remarkable intellectual achievements, was not immune to the flaws and challenges of everyday life. Through his relationship with Eliza, Hamilton demonstrated the importance of love, loyalty, and personal sacrifice. In many ways, Eliza's forgiveness and support allowed Hamilton to continue his work on behalf of the nation. Her role in his life provides a poignant contrast to his public persona as a determined and ambitious statesman. Together they navigated the challenges of political life, and their partnership remains one of the most enduring and human aspects of Hamilton's story. The depth of Hamilton's devotion to his family is perhaps best illustrated in the letters he wrote to his children. Despite the tumult of his career, Hamilton remained focused on his role as a father. His letters show a man who believed in the importance of education, discipline, and moral integrity. He was deeply concerned with his children's futures, knowing that the legacy he left them would shape their lives long after his own had ended. Though Hamilton's personal life was complicated, it also reflects the same ambition and drive that defined his public career. His family, despite the struggles they faced, became a source of strength, love, and stability. Eliza's role in Hamilton's life was instrumental not only in supporting him through political and personal hardships, but also in ensuring that his legacy would endure long after his death. Alexander Hamilton's financial system, established during his time as Secretary of the Treasury, remains one of the cornerstones of his legacy. His vision for the economic future of the United States was clear. He sought to create a nation that could stand on equal footing with the great powers of Europe, a nation with a stable and unified financial structure. Through his policies and reforms, Hamilton played a pivotal role in shaping the nation's economic identity and establishing the foundation for its future growth. At the heart of Hamilton's financial vision was the creation of a strong central banking system. In 1791, after much debate and opposition, Congress passed Hamilton's proposal to create the first national bank, the Bank of the United States. This institution would serve as the depository for federal funds, regulate the nation's money supply, and promote economic stability. The national bank was a bold move that centralized financial control and provided the government with the necessary tools to manage its debts and financial obligations. It also helped to regulate the issuance of currency, creating a uniform system that could facilitate commerce across the growing nation. The creation of the Bank of the United States was controversial, particularly among the agrarian interests of the South. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, leaders of the Democratic-Republican Party, opposed the bank on the grounds that it was unconstitutional and gave too much power to the federal government. They argued that the Constitution did not explicitly grant the government the power to establish such an institution. Hamilton, however, believed that the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution allowed the federal government to create institutions that were not explicitly mentioned in the document, as long as they were necessary for carrying out its duties. In this, Hamilton's vision prevailed, and the bank became a vital part of the nation's financial infrastructure. Hamilton's financial policies were not limited to the creation of a national bank. He also advocated for the assumption of state debts by the federal government. At the end of the Revolutionary War, both the federal government and individual states were deeply in debt. Hamilton's plan to consolidate these debts under federal control was designed to strengthen the nation's financial standing, give the government greater authority, and enhance the country's creditworthiness. By assuming state debts, Hamilton ensured that the United States could borrow money at favorable interest rates, which would be essential for future growth and stability. Hamilton also sought to establish a system of tariffs and excise taxes to generate revenue for the federal government. In his vision, the federal government needed a stable source of income to fund its operations and repay the national debt. Hamilton's economic policies included the implementation of a protective tariff on imported goods, which would encourage domestic manufacturing and reduce the country's dependence on foreign imports. He also proposed an excise tax on goods like whiskey, which would generate additional revenue for the government, while also encouraging the production of domestically made goods. Despite opposition from agrarian interests who believed that these taxes unfairly burden the common people, Hamilton's financial policies laid the foundation for the economic growth of the United States. His vision of a strong central government with the authority to regulate commerce, manage national debt, and provide for the nation's economic future became the model upon which future administrations would build. Hamilton's policies, though controversial in their time, were instrumental in ensuring the United States' financial stability and securing its position in the global economy. Hamilton's financial system was not without its critics, but its impact on the United States was undeniable. His work helped to establish the United States as a creditworthy nation, capable of securing loans and managing its finances with the efficiency and stability needed for long-term growth. The creation of a national bank, the assumption of state debts, and the establishment of a central authority to regulate the nation's financial system set the stage for the economic success that would follow in the 19th century. In the years following Hamilton's death, his financial system continued to influence American economic policy. While his federalist vision of a strong central government eventually lost ground to the more agrarian and decentralized ideals of Jeffersonian democracy, Hamilton's financial legacy endured. The national bank, which had been temporarily dismantled after his death, was re-established in 1816, and many of his ideas about fiscal responsibility, government debt management, and economic regulation remained central to the nation's financial framework. Even today, Hamilton's financial system continues to serve as a model for modern economic policy. His belief in the importance of a stable and unified financial system, his vision for a strong national government capable of managing national debt, and his commitment to the country's economic prosperity have left a lasting imprint on American governance. Hamilton's legacy as the architect of the nation's financial system remains one of his greatest achievements, and his work continues to shape the economic landscape of the United States. Hamilton's financial vision was not merely about creating a stable economy. It was about ensuring the United States could stand independently in a rapidly changing world. His policies set the stage for a prosperous nation, one that would go on to expand its borders, build a strong industrial base, and compete with the great powers of Europe. Hamilton's financial system gave the United States the tools it needed to succeed, and his influence on American economic policy is still felt today. As the years progressed, Alexander Hamilton found himself increasingly sidelined from the political scene. Following his death in 1804, after the duel with Aaron Burr, Hamilton's personal and professional life came to a tragic and untimely end. Yet, his influence on the United States continued to echo through the corridors of American politics and beyond. The nation he helped create, the policies he put in place, and the financial infrastructure he built would live on as central pillars of the republic he had worked tirelessly to shape. Hamilton's final years, though marked by a series of personal and political conflicts, were also a time when his vision for America began to take root in the fabric of the nation. By the early 1800s, Hamilton had already helped to establish the economic foundations of the new republic. His contributions as Secretary of the Treasury, particularly in terms of creating a national bank, stabilizing the nation's debt, and promoting economic growth, were widely recognized as essential to the success of the United States. However, despite his significant achievements, Hamilton's relationship with the country's political leadership, especially with Jefferson and his allies, became increasingly strained. While Hamilton's policies were instrumental in laying the groundwork for American economic prosperity, his ideal of a strong federal government came into conflict with the emerging vision of a decentralized government championed by Jefferson and his followers. By 1800, when Thomas Jefferson won the presidency, Hamilton's Federalist Party was in decline. Although he was no longer in public office, Hamilton continued to advocate for his vision of a strong central government, though with increasingly limited influence. His views, deeply rooted in his belief in the necessity of economic regulation, a stable currency, and strong national governance, remained out of sync with the populist, agrarian ideals that came to define Jeffersonian democracy. The election of 1800 marked the end of Hamilton's political relevance, but his intellectual contributions to the young republic remained foundational. Though the Federalist Party had lost its political power, Hamilton's legacy as an architect of the nation's financial system endured. His establishment of a national bank, his vision for national debt consolidation, and his belief in a strong central government would be a part of the political conversation for decades. While Jefferson's Democratic Republicans held sway over the political landscape, Hamilton's economic vision for the nation would continue to guide future generations, regardless of political affiliation. It was in his final years, following his public political battles and personal controversies, that Hamilton's focus shifted inward, toward his family and the personal relationships that had always been of great importance to him. His relationship with his wife, Eliza Schuyler, and their 8 children was a source of emotional fulfillment, offering Hamilton a rare space of stability amid his tumultuous public life. Although Hamilton's involvement in the Reynolds affair and his public admission of guilt caused a scandal that almost derailed his career, his dedication to his family remained unshaken. His letters to Eliza reflect the depth of his affection for her and the love they shared despite the challenges they faced together. Hamilton's final year was marked by a renewed focus on his legacy and what he would leave behind for his children. In his last moments, Hamilton expressed concern for his family's future and hoped to leave them a solid foundation to build upon. While Hamilton's financial legacy was well established, his political legacy was less certain. In the eyes of many, Hamilton's vision for a strong federal government was increasingly at odds with the direction the nation was taking under Jefferson and his successors. Despite these ideological shifts, Hamilton's legacy was solidified in the years after his death. The policies he championed and the institutions he helped create laid the groundwork for the United States' emergence as a global power in the 19th century. The national bank, the system of debt management, and the financial institutions Hamilton championed remained central to the functioning of the U.S. government. In many ways, the nation's economic success in the decades following Hamilton's death was a direct result of his vision and the financial system he had established. By the time of his death, Hamilton's political influence had waned, but his intellectual contributions continued to shape the direction of the United States. His belief in a strong central government, his commitment to a stable financial system, and his advocacy for economic growth remained part of the national discourse. Even as political leadership shifted toward a more decentralized agrarian model, Hamilton's economic policies remained integral to the growth of the country. In the years following Hamilton's death, his vision of an industrialized, commercially driven America would slowly come to fruition. The country's eventual rise as a global economic power owed much to the financial system Hamilton had put in place. By the end of the 19th century, the United States had firmly established itself as a dominant economic force in the world, with many of Hamilton's policies continuing to serve as guiding principles in the nation's economic development. The legacy of Alexander Hamilton was not one of political triumph, but rather one of intellectual and economic achievement. While he was often at odds with the prevailing political ideologies of his time, his contributions to the United States were undeniable. His vision for a strong central government, a unified financial system, and an industrialized economy laid the groundwork for the nation's success in the years to come. Despite the controversies and the political battles that marked his life, Hamilton's place in American history remained secure, and his contributions continue to resonate in the economic and political landscape of the United States today. Alexander Hamilton's views on slavery have been a subject of much debate and scrutiny. His legacy, widely celebrated for his role in founding the United States and shaping its financial system, is also complicated by his involvement in and relationship with the institution of slavery. While Hamilton is often praised for his progressive stances on many issues, his views and actions regarding slavery reflect the contradictions that were a hallmark of early American society, where ideals of liberty and equality often stood in tension with the practice of slavery. Hamilton's relationship with slavery was shaped in part by his early life in the Caribbean. Born on the island of Nevis in the West Indies, Hamilton grew up in a region where slavery was an integral part of the economy. The sugar plantations of the Caribbean were heavily dependent on enslaved labor, and Hamilton, though not directly involved in the ownership of slaves, witnessed firsthand the brutal reality of the system. Despite this exposure, Hamilton's early experiences did not initially lead him to take an active stance against slavery. However, as Hamilton's political and intellectual journey progressed, his views on slavery began to evolve. During his time in New York, he became increasingly aware of the moral and political implications of slavery, particularly as it related to the new nation's values of freedom and equality. By the time of the American Revolution, when the rhetoric of liberty and independence was central to the fight against British rule, Hamilton began to see slavery as incompatible with the nation's founding principles. As a leader in the Federalist movement, Hamilton advocated for a government that would promote freedom and justice, but he was also aware that slavery was entrenched in the economic and social systems of both the North and the South. Despite his growing discomfort with slavery, Hamilton's position on the issue was not as radical as some of his contemporaries, such as Thomas Paine or the abolitionists who would later become more vocal in their opposition to the institution. While Hamilton believed that slavery was a moral wrong, he did not immediately advocate for its abolition on a national scale. Instead, his actions and statements about slavery were often more cautious, particularly in his political career. Hamilton's support for the abolition of the slave trade is one area where his views on slavery became clearer. As a delegate at the Constitutional Convention in 1787, Hamilton supported the inclusion of a provision that would allow the abolition of the international slave trade after 1808. This provision, which was ultimately included in the U.S. Constitution, was a significant step toward limiting the expansion of slavery in the United States, although it did not immediately end the practice itself. Hamilton's support for this provision indicates that he was willing to take steps toward restricting slavery, even if he did not push for immediate abolition. In his personal life, Hamilton took actions that were somewhat aligned with his anti-slavery views. He was a member of the New York Manumission Society, an organization dedicated to the gradual emancipation of enslaved people. The society, which was founded in 1785, advocated for the rights of free African Americans and sought to provide legal avenues for the emancipation of slaves in New York. Although Hamilton did not publicly call for immediate abolition, his involvement in the society suggests that he believed in the eventual end of slavery, at least in the northern states. Hamilton's financial policies also had implications for slavery. His economic system, which focused on strengthening the federal government and promoting commerce, was more favorable to northern industrial interests than to southern agrarian economies that relied heavily on slave labor. In this sense, Hamilton's vision of an industrialized, market-driven America was in tension with the agricultural economy of the South, which depended on the exploitation of enslaved labor. However, Hamilton's views on slavery were not as unequivocally abolitionist as those of some of his contemporaries. His actions and statements on the issue suggest that while he saw slavery as a moral evil, he did not prioritize it as a central issue in his political career. His focus was primarily on creating a stable, unified country with a strong financial system, and he did not push for the immediate abolition of slavery as a national policy. As such, Hamilton's legacy on the issue of slavery is complicated, and his efforts to limit the spread of slavery in certain areas of the country were overshadowed by the persistence of the institution, particularly in the South. Despite this, Hamilton's contributions to the anti-slavery cause cannot be overlooked. His support for the abolition of the international slave trade, his involvement in the New York Manumission Society, and his broader vision for a strong, unified government all reflected his belief that slavery was incompatible with the principles of freedom and equality that the United States was founded upon. However, it is important to recognize that Hamilton's stance on slavery was shaped by the political realities of his time, and his views on the subject were not as radical or as immediate as those of later abolitionists. In the years following Hamilton's death, the issue of slavery became one of the central flashpoints in American politics. The tensions between the pro-slavery South and the anti-slavery North eventually led to the Civil War, a conflict that would result in the abolition of slavery through the 13th Amendment in 1865. Hamilton, who had supported the gradual abolition of slavery in New York and had advocated for restrictions on the international slave trade, did not live to see the end of the institution. However, his contributions to the intellectual and political foundations of the United States laid the groundwork for the eventual fight against slavery and the triumph of freedom. Hamilton's legacy, when viewed through the lens of slavery, is one of moral complexity. While he was not a vocal abolitionist in the way that some later figures would be, he did take steps to limit the spread of slavery, and his economic policies were at odds with the agrarian, slave-based economy of the South. His involvement in the Manumission Society and his support for the abolition of the international slave trade reflect his belief that slavery was morally wrong, even if he did not advocate for immediate abolition on a national level. Though Alexander Hamilton's life was marked by political battles, personal struggles, and a tragic early death, his influence on American politics has endured for centuries, from the creation of the nation's financial system to the shaping of the executive branch. Hamilton's contributions were instrumental in the formation of the United States. His vision of a strong, centralized government, capable of managing both domestic affairs and international challenges, laid the foundation for the country's political system, even as political tides shifted in the years following his death. Hamilton's most lasting political influence lies in his advocacy for a strong federal government. At the time of the American Revolution, the United States was deeply divided. The Articles of Confederation, the country's first constitution, had created a weak central government that lacked the authority to govern effectively. The states were powerful and independent, and their lack of unity led to economic instability, interstate disputes, and a lack of coordination in foreign affairs. In response to these challenges, Hamilton championed the idea of a strong centralized government. He believed that a strong executive branch, a national bank, and a unified financial system were essential to the country's survival. His arguments for a stronger government were reflected in his work at the Constitutional Convention, where he advocated for the creation of a robust federal system that could hold the nation together and provide for its citizens' welfare. Although his ideas were met with resistance, particularly from those who favoured a more decentralised form of government, Hamilton's vision ultimately prevailed, and the US Constitution was adopted in 1787. As the first Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton put his vision for a strong government into action. He established a national bank which centralised financial control, created a national debt structure, and implemented policies that promoted commerce, stability, and national growth. Hamilton's economic policies were designed to strengthen the federal government's ability to manage the nation's finances, ensuring that the United States could pay off its Revolutionary War debts and establish creditworthiness on the world stage. The national bank, though controversial, became one of Hamilton's most enduring contributions to American politics. Hamilton's influence was not confined to economic policy. He also played a key role in shaping the office of the president. As a proponent of a strong executive, Hamilton believed that the president should be empowered to take decisive action in times of crisis. He argued that the president needed the authority to protect national interests and maintain order, even if that meant taking actions that might be unpopular or controversial. This view of the executive branch as a central source of power was reflected in the Constitution, and it has continued to influence American political thought. Hamilton's advocacy for a strong executive was evident in his support for George Washington during the early years of the Republic. As Washington's aide-de-camp during the Revolutionary War and his trusted advisor in the first administration, Hamilton was a key figure in shaping the presidency. He believed that the president should be a unifying figure, capable of balancing the interests of the states while maintaining national cohesion. His ideas about the presidency would influence future presidents, including Washington, Adams, and Jefferson, and they continue to shape the role of the executive in American government. Hamilton's influence extended beyond the presidency and the financial system. His political philosophy was rooted in the belief that a strong centralized government was necessary for the nation's survival and prosperity. He believed that the federal government should have the power to regulate commerce, manage the nation's defense, and ensure the general welfare of its citizens. While his vision was often in tension with the more populist agrarian ideals of Thomas Jefferson and his Democratic Republican allies, Hamilton's ideas became foundational to American political thought. One of the most significant aspects of Hamilton's influence was his ability to shape the direction of American politics through his ideas, even after his death. While his Federalist Party eventually faded into obscurity, many of his ideas continued to be a part of the national conversation. The belief in a strong federal government, the importance of economic regulation, and the need for a centralized financial system all continued to influence American political leaders and policymakers throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Even as political power shifted from the Federalists to the Democratic Republicans and later to the Whigs and Republicans, Hamilton's legacy remained a powerful force in American politics. The rise of the Whig Party in the early 19th century, which advocated for a strong federal government and a robust economy, can be traced back to Hamilton's ideas. The Whigs, who were often at odds with the Democratic Party's more decentralized vision, drew inspiration from Hamilton's belief in a strong national government that could promote economic development and regulate commerce. Similarly, the Republican Party, which emerged in the mid-19th century, embraced many of Hamilton's economic policies, particularly in regard to the national bank and a unified financial system. Hamilton's influence was also felt in the development of American foreign policy. His belief in a strong central government capable of managing international relations was reflected in his advocacy for neutrality during the French Revolution. Hamilton's desire to avoid entangling alliances with European powers was a key element of his foreign policy philosophy. This idea of American neutrality, though not always adhered to, became a central tenet of US foreign policy for much of the 19th century, particularly during the administrations of Washington and Monroe. Hamilton's political legacy also had a profound impact on the development of American law. His work as a founding father, particularly his contributions to the creation of the Constitution, laid the foundation for the American legal system. The Constitution, which established the framework for the federal government, was influenced by Hamilton's vision of a strong central authority, his belief in a government that could act decisively in times of crisis, and his advocacy for the protection of individual rights and liberties shaped the development of American legal thought. Though Hamilton's political party, the Federalists, eventually gave way to other political movements, his vision of a strong, unified nation remained central to the political discourse of the United States. His contributions to the founding of the Republic were immense, and his ideas continue to shape American political thought to this day. Hamilton's legacy is not just one of political power, but of intellectual influence, a legacy that has endured through centuries of political change. Alexander Hamilton's philosophical contributions to the founding of the United States were as significant as his political and economic achievements. His ideas on government, human nature, and national identity shaped much of the intellectual landscape of the early Republic. Hamilton's philosophy was rooted in a deep belief in the necessity of a strong central government, which he saw as essential to preserving the nation's stability, prosperity, and security. His ideas, which were often in contrast to the more idealistic views of his political opponents, played a crucial role in shaping the development of American political thought. At the heart of Hamilton's philosophy was his belief in the importance of a strong central government. This belief was influenced by his early experiences as an orphan in the Caribbean, where he witnessed the chaos and instability of a weak, decentralized society. Hamilton came to see a strong government as the only means of ensuring social order and protecting individual liberties. He argued that without a central authority, the United States would descend into chaos, with states acting independently and pursuing their own interests at the expense of the common good. This belief in the necessity of a strong federal government was a defining feature of Hamilton's philosophy. He believed that the central government should have the power to regulate commerce, maintain national defense, and provide for the general welfare of its citizens. Hamilton's vision for the United States was one of unity and strength, where the federal government could act decisively to protect the nation's interests and ensure its future growth and prosperity. Hamilton's view of government was also shaped by his understanding of human nature. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who believed in the inherent goodness of man, Hamilton had a more cynical view of human nature. He believed that people were inherently selfish and that power should be concentrated in the hands of the few who were capable of governing effectively. In this sense, Hamilton's political philosophy was influenced by the ideas of European thinkers like Thomas Hobbes, who argued that strong, centralized authority was necessary to keep human nature in check and prevent chaos. Hamilton's belief in a strong government was also tied to his belief in the necessity of an economic system that could support national stability and growth. He saw the economy as the backbone of a strong government, and he believed that the government should have the power to regulate trade, manage the nation's finances, and promote economic development. Hamilton's economic policies, which included the creation of a national bank, the assumption of state debts, and the establishment of a national debt structure, were all designed to create a stable and prosperous economy that could support the nation's government. At the same time, Hamilton's philosophical contributions were not limited to political and economic thought. He also made significant contributions to the development of American political theory, particularly in his role as one of the authors of the Federalist Papers. Along with James Madison and John Jay, Hamilton wrote a series of essays that defended the US Constitution and argued for its ratification. The Federalist Papers were deeply philosophical in nature, addressing the theoretical underpinnings of the Constitution and explaining why a strong federal government was necessary for the survival of the Republic. In the Federalist Papers, Hamilton articulated his vision of government as a system of checks and balances, where different branches of government would act as counterweights to one another, ensuring that no one branch could become too powerful. He believed that a strong executive branch, in particular, was essential for the effective functioning of government, as it would be able to act quickly and decisively in times of crisis. Hamilton's views on executive power were a significant departure from the more democratic ideals of Thomas Jefferson and his followers, who believed in a more limited federal government and greater power for the states. Hamilton's ideas on human nature, government, and economics were not universally accepted, particularly by his political opponents. Thomas Jefferson, in particular, rejected Hamilton's belief in a strong central government and instead advocated for a more decentralized system where power was vested in the states and local communities. Jefferson's vision of a republic was one where the government was limited and the people were free to pursue their own interests without interference from a powerful central authority. This philosophical divide between Hamilton and Jefferson would become one of the central conflicts of early American politics. Despite the opposition he faced, Hamilton's philosophical contributions have endured. His belief in the necessity of a strong central government, his emphasis on the importance of a stable economy, and his view of government as a system of checks and balances have all become foundational principles of American political thought. While Hamilton's specific policies may have been controversial in his time, his broader vision for the United States as a unified, prosperous nation has shaped the course of American history. Hamilton's philosophy also had a profound impact on the development of American law. His belief in the importance of a strong federal government and his advocacy for a centralized financial system influenced the interpretation of the Constitution and the expansion of federal power throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Hamilton's ideas about the role of government in regulating commerce, managing national defense, and ensuring economic stability were reflected in Supreme Court decisions that expanded federal power, such as McCulloch v. Maryland, 1819, which upheld the constitutionality of the national bank, and Gibbons v. Ogden, 1824, which affirmed the federal government's authority to regulate interstate commerce. In many ways, Hamilton's political philosophy laid the groundwork for the modern American. Alexander Hamilton's legacy is woven into the very fabric of the United States political system. While his career was cut short, the principles and systems he championed continue to resonate in American politics to this day. As one of the most influential figures in the early years of the Republic, Hamilton's work helped shape the framework of the U.S. government, establishing vital institutions and a strong political structure that would support the country through its formative years and beyond. Hamilton's vision for a powerful centralized government was integral to the development of the American political system. His belief that the federal government should have the authority to regulate commerce, provide for national defense, and ensure economic stability was central to his political philosophy. This idea of a strong federal government ran counter to the decentralized, agrarian vision advocated by Thomas Jefferson and his followers, but Hamilton's influence ultimately shaped the direction of the United States. As the first Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton was tasked with stabilizing a nation in financial chaos. His economic reforms laid the groundwork for the United States financial system, creating the national bank and establishing the country's debt structure. The establishment of a strong financial system was vital to the future success of the United States, and Hamilton's work in this area ensured that the federal government would be able to borrow money at favorable rates, manage its debt, and promote Economic growth. Hamilton's influence also extended to the establishment of political parties in the United States. While he did not intend to create a political party system, his rivalry with Thomas Jefferson and the differing visions for the country's future led to the formation of the Federalist Party and the Democratic Republican Party. The Federalist Party, which Hamilton led, advocated for a strong national government, a national bank, and a robust economy. Jefferson's Democratic Republicans, on the other hand, championed a more decentralized government, agrarianism, and states' rights. The emergence of political parties in the United States was a natural outgrowth of Hamilton and Jefferson's competing visions for the nation. Hamilton's Federalists believed in the importance of a strong, centralized government that could regulate commerce, maintain national defense, and promote economic stability. They viewed a strong executive branch as essential to the success of the Republic. Jefferson's Democratic Republicans, by contrast, believed in a more limited federal government, placing greater power in the hands of the states and advocating for an agrarian-based economy. Hamilton's political philosophy had a profound impact on the shaping of the presidency. His belief in a strong executive branch, capable of taking decisive action in times of crisis, laid the groundwork for the powerful presidency that would emerge in the 19th and 20th centuries. In his writings and speeches, Hamilton argued that the president should have the authority to act quickly and decisively in matters of national importance. He believed that the president should be able to take unilateral action in times of war or national emergency, and his views on executive power would influence the role of the presidency for generations. Hamilton's ideas on executive power were most clearly articulated in the Federalist Papers, a series of essays he co-authored with James Madison and John Jay in support of the U.S. Constitution. The Federalist Papers were designed to persuade the states to ratify the Constitution, and Hamilton used them as an opportunity to argue for a strong central government and a robust executive. In particular, Hamilton emphasized the need for a president who could serve as a unifying force in times of crisis, capable of balancing the interests of the states and protecting the nation's sovereignty. This idea of a strong, authoritative president became one of the most enduring aspects of Hamilton's political legacy. In addition to his contributions to the presidency, Hamilton also played a key role in shaping the nation's legal framework. The Constitution, which Hamilton helped to draft, established the foundation for American governance. The document's emphasis on a strong federal government, a separation of powers, and a system of checks and balances was designed to ensure that no single branch of government could become too powerful. Hamilton's vision of government as a system of checks and balances, where different branches of government would act as counterweights to one another, was central to the design of the Constitution. Hamilton's role in the establishment of the national financial system and the legal framework for the federal government also laid the foundation for American foreign policy. His belief in a strong central government capable of managing international relations was reflected in his advocacy for neutrality during the French Revolution. Hamilton's desire to avoid entangling alliances with European powers was a key element of his foreign policy philosophy. While Hamilton's views on foreign relations were often at odds with those of Jefferson and his followers, his advocacy for neutrality became a guiding principle of U.S. foreign policy throughout the 19th century. While Hamilton's Federalist Party eventually declined and gave way to the Democratic Republicans, his influence on the American political system remained powerful. The ideals of a strong central government, a unified economy, and a robust national defense remained central to American political discourse throughout the 19th century. Even as political leadership shifted toward a more populist agrarian model, Hamilton's ideas about the role of government continued to shape the direction of the country. His financial policies, his belief in executive authority, and his vision of national unity remained integral to the development of the United States. Hamilton's contributions to American politics were not always fully appreciated in his own time, but his influence on the country's political, economic and legal systems is undeniable. His vision of a strong, centralized government capable of governing effectively, promoting economic growth, and ensuring national security has shaped the development of the United States for over 2 centuries. Hamilton's legacy is one of intellectual achievement and political foresight, and his contributions continue to influence the American political system to this day. One of the most intriguing aspects of Alexander Hamilton's legacy is his stance on the relationship between religion and government. While the early years of the United States were characterized by debates over the role of religion in public life, Hamilton's views on the subject were shaped by his broader political philosophy, which emphasized a strong central government, individual liberty, and the importance of moral values. Hamilton's thoughts on religion, though not as extensively explored as his views on economics and governance, played a significant role in shaping the country's foundational principles. Hamilton was a deeply religious man, but his approach to religion in government was more pragmatic than ideologically driven. He recognized the role of religion in promoting moral behavior and social order, but he also understood the necessity of keeping religious institutions separate from the functioning of the federal government. This belief in the separation of church and state was consistent with his broader vision of a government that protected individual freedoms while maintaining social order. In his early life, Hamilton was exposed to a variety of religious traditions. Born in the Caribbean, he witnessed the religious diversity of the region, where various Christian denominations coexisted alongside indigenous beliefs and African religious practices. While Hamilton himself was a devout Christian, he did not subscribe to any particular denomination and was more focused on the moral teachings of Christianity rather than religious dogma. As a statesman, Hamilton supported the idea that religion could be a force for good in society, promoting virtue, public morality and social cohesion. However, he was wary of the influence of religious institutions on government. Like many of the Founding Fathers, Hamilton believed that government should be secular in nature, with religious organizations having no direct involvement in the political sphere. This belief was grounded in the understanding that a government that privileges one religion over another could undermine the principles of liberty and equality on which the nation was founded. Hamilton's personal religious beliefs were rooted in the Christian tradition, and he was a member of the Church of England. However, his views on religion and government were shaped by his belief in the importance of reason and rationality. He saw religion as a source of moral guidance, but he did not believe that it should dictate public policy or government action. In this sense, Hamilton's approach to religion was in line with the Enlightenment values that influenced much of the American Revolution, which emphasized reason, individual rights, and the separation of church and state. Hamilton's support for the separation of church and state was reflected in his contributions to the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees religious freedom and prohibits the establishment of a state religion. The First Amendment of the Constitution, which Hamilton supported, ensures that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This provision was a critical safeguard against the dangers of religious tyranny and ensured that the government would remain neutral with respect to religion. Hamilton, along with other founding fathers, saw this as essential to the survival of a free republic, where individuals were free to practice their religion without fear of government interference. Hamilton's views on religion were also influenced by his belief in the importance of civic virtue. He argued that religion could play a vital role in fostering virtuous citizens who would contribute to the common good. In his writings, Hamilton emphasized that a republic depended on the moral character of its citizens and that religion could help instill the values necessary for a functioning democracy. However, Hamilton's belief in the role of religion in society did not extend to the idea that the government should promote or enforce religious beliefs. Instead, He saw religion as a private matter, one that should not interfere with the operations of government. Despite Hamilton's personal religious convictions, his political philosophy was firmly grounded in the belief that government should be secular, and that no religious group should have special privileges or powers. This position was consistent with his broader views on governance, which prioritized the protection of individual freedoms and the establishment of a government that acted in the best interests of all citizens, regardless of their religious beliefs. Hamilton believed that a government that was too closely aligned with religion could lead to religious intolerance and the erosion of personal freedoms. Hamilton's approach to religion and government was also shaped by his understanding of human nature. Like many of his contemporaries, Hamilton believed that individuals were inherently self-interested, and that a strong government was necessary to ensure that this self-interest did not lead to chaos or conflict. In this context, Hamilton saw religion as a tool for promoting moral behavior and social order, but he did not believe that it should be used to justify the concentration of political power or to limit individual liberties. His belief in the separation of church and state was grounded in the idea that government should not interfere with people's private beliefs and practices, and that religious organizations should not have the power to dictate public policy. Hamilton's views on religion and government were not without controversy, particularly among those who believed that religion should play a more central role in public life. However, his approach to the issue reflected the broader philosophical and political debates of the time. Many of the founding fathers, including Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, shared Hamilton's belief in the importance of a secular government, one that would protect individual freedoms and prevent the government from becoming entangled in religious matters. In the years following Hamilton's death, the influence of his ideas on religion and government continued to shape American political thought. The principles of religious freedom and the separation of church and state, which Hamilton helped to establish, became cornerstones of American democracy. Hamilton's support for religious liberty and his belief in the importance of a secular government laid the groundwork for the nation's commitment to freedom of religion and the protection of individual rights. Hamilton's views on religion and government were not as radical as those of some of his contemporaries, but they were a reflection of his pragmatic approach to governance. He understood the importance of religion in shaping the moral character of citizens, but he also recognized that government must remain neutral in matters of faith. In this way, Hamilton's philosophy on religion and government embodied the balance between personal freedom and social order that he believed was essential to the survival of the American Republic. Alexander Hamilton's legacy extends far beyond his political and economic contributions. While his work in shaping the United States financial system and government is well known, Hamilton's cultural legacy is also significant. His ideas, his life story, and the controversies surrounding him have had a lasting impact on American culture, from literature and education to the arts and popular media. Over time, Hamilton has become an emblem of both the promise and the contradictions inherent in the American experiment. One of the most enduring aspects of Hamilton's cultural legacy is his role in shaping the narrative of the American Revolution and the founding of the United States. As one of the key figures in the early years of the Republic, Hamilton's ideas and actions have been enshrined in historical accounts of the nation's origins. His contributions to the U.S. Constitution, his role in the Revolutionary War, and his vision for the country's economic future have all been subjects of great interest to historians, scholars, and writers. However, Hamilton's legacy is not confined to academic analysis or historical texts. In the 21st century, Hamilton's story was revitalized in popular culture with the release of Lin-Manuel Miranda's Broadway musical Hamilton. The musical, which debuted in 2015, introduced a new generation to Hamilton's life and ideas, blending hip-hop, historical drama, and vibrant storytelling. The show became a cultural phenomenon, sparking renewed interest in Hamilton's life and work. Miranda's Hamilton not only brought Hamilton's story to the stage, but also created a broader cultural conversation about the Founding Fathers and their impact on modern American life. The musical's success was not just due to its historical accuracy or catchy tunes, but also because it explored themes that resonate with contemporary audiences, such as ambition, legacy, and the pursuit of a better future. The production's portrayal of Hamilton as a self-made immigrant who rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most influential figures in American history captivated audiences and sparked discussions about the relevance of Hamilton's ideas in today's political and social landscape. The cultural impact of Hamilton has also extended into the world of education. The musical has been used in classrooms and history curricula to teach students about the founding of the United States, the complexities of Hamilton's life, and the enduring relevance of his ideas. By reimagining the past through a modern lens, Hamilton has made history more accessible and engaging to a wider audience, bridging the gap between the academic study of history and the lived experiences of contemporary society. Through this cultural reinvention, Hamilton has been made relatable to younger generations, many of whom may not have had an interest in the Founding Fathers otherwise. Beyond the stage, Hamilton's story has also been explored in literature, film, and documentaries. Biographies of Hamilton, such as Ron Chernow's Alexander Hamilton, which served as the inspiration for Miranda's musical, have helped to shape the public's understanding of his life. Chernow's biography, published in 2004, revived interest in Hamilton and solidified his place as one of the most important and complex figures in American history. In addition to traditional biographies, Hamilton has appeared in works of historical fiction and non-fiction, often examined as both a hero and a man of contradictions. Hamilton's cultural influence can also be seen in the broader discourse on American identity and values. His life story, rising from a poor, illegitimate immigrant to become one of the key architects of the United States, embodies the American dream. His intellectual rigor, political foresight, and ability to navigate the complexities of early American politics have made him a symbol of perseverance, ambition, and the pursuit of greatness. His contributions to the formation of the United States, particularly in the areas of finance and government, have made him an enduring figure in the country's mythology. Yet Hamilton's legacy is also one of moral complexity. His views on slavery, his personal scandals, and his conflicts with other founding figures such as Thomas Jefferson and John Adams present a more nuanced picture of the man behind the myth. In the years since his death, Hamilton has been both criticized and praised for his actions, and his story has sparked debates about the contradictions in the founding of the United States, particularly when it comes to the issue of slavery. While Hamilton did not take a radical stance on slavery, his opposition to the institution's expansion and his support for the abolition of the slave trade in 1808 reflect his belief that slavery was incompatible with the ideals of liberty and equality. This complexity has contributed to Hamilton's ongoing relevance in cultural discussions. As the United States continues to grapple with issues of race, inequality, and social justice, Hamilton's legacy offers both lessons and cautionary tales. His story prompts questions about the limits of compromise, the role of government in shaping society, and the moral choices that individuals make in pursuit of a larger vision. Hamilton's life and ideas challenge us to consider how we reconcile our ideals with our actions, both in the past and in the present. In contemporary American culture, Hamilton's legacy remains alive and well, not only in the political sphere but also in the arts, education, and the popular imagination. His ideas, his story, and the controversies surrounding his life continue to inspire new generations of thinkers, artists, and leaders. Whether through the lens of the Broadway stage, historical scholarship, or cultural commentary, Hamilton remains an enduring figure, one whose contributions to the founding of the United States continue to shape the nation's political and cultural identity. Alexander Hamilton's role in the founding of the United States has been both celebrated and contested, placing him at the center of debates about the nation's character, its future, and its ideals. While he is undoubtedly one of the most important figures in American history, Hamilton's legacy must be understood in the context of the other founding fathers, whose different political philosophies and visions for the new republic often clashed. To fully appreciate Hamilton's place in American history, it's essential to compare his contributions to those of the other great figures who helped shape the country. In the context of the other founders, Hamilton's views were often in stark contrast to those of Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and even John Adams. While Jefferson and Madison championed a vision of a decentralized republic with limited federal power, Hamilton's ideas were grounded in a belief that a strong centralized government was necessary to safeguard the republic and ensure its success. Where Jefferson saw an agrarian society based on farming and individual liberties as the ideal, Hamilton envisioned a dynamic nation with a thriving industrial economy, a strong national defense, and a unified financial system. Jefferson, who had served as the nation's third president, was perhaps Hamilton's most prominent ideological opponent. Jefferson's vision for the United States was deeply rooted in his distrust of centralized power. He believed that the success of the republic depended on the independence of the individual states and the virtue of its citizenry. Hamilton, by contrast, believed that without a powerful federal government, the nation would descend into anarchy or be vulnerable to foreign manipulation. Their differing views were so pronounced that they became the intellectual foundation for the rise of America's first political parties, the Federalists led by Hamilton and the Democratic Republicans led by Jefferson. James Madison, often considered the father of the Constitution, was another central figure in the debates over the nation's direction. Madison shared some of Jefferson's skepticism about a strong central government, but also recognized the necessity of a federal structure to protect against factionalism and maintain order. In the early years, Madison worked closely with Hamilton to draft the Constitution, but as time went on, he grew disillusioned with Hamilton's vision of a strong executive branch and centralized financial control. Madison's opposition to Hamilton's policies in the 1790s ultimately led him to align more closely with Jefferson and the Democratic-Republican Party. Despite their disagreements, Madison's role in creating the Constitution was vital, and his collaboration with Hamilton in the Federalist Papers helped establish the framework of the nation's government. While Hamilton and Jefferson's rivalry is perhaps the most well-known, other founders also had differing views on the shape of the new nation. John Adams, the second President of the United States, was another important figure in this debate. While Adams shared many of Hamilton's concerns about the necessity of a strong government, he had reservations about Hamilton's more authoritarian tendencies. Adams, who was deeply committed to republicanism, worried that Hamilton's policies could concentrate too much power in the hands of the executive and federal government. Their differences became particularly apparent when Hamilton's Federalist policies were challenged by Adams's more cautious approach during his presidency. Despite their differences, Adams played a crucial role in guiding the nation through the fragile early years of its independence, and his contribution should not be overshadowed by the ideological divide between him and Hamilton. In terms of his lasting influence, Hamilton's legacy also diverges from that of his contemporaries in how it has been remembered and understood over time. While Jefferson and Madison became icons of democracy and individual liberty, Hamilton's reputation remained more complex. His strong belief in a powerful government was often viewed as contrary to the democratic ideals that were central to the American Revolution. Hamilton's influence, therefore, was more apparent in the nation's economic and political institutions, which were foundational to the success of the country, but often overlooked in the broader democratic narrative. Hamilton's influence can be seen in the shaping of the U.S. Constitution, the establishment of the National Bank and his financial policies, which helped secure the country's future. However, His contributions to American democracy are often overshadowed by the more populist legacies of Jefferson and Madison. Jefferson's vision for an agrarian republic, with its emphasis on individual rights and state sovereignty, resonated deeply with the American people and shaped the direction of U.S. politics for much of the 19th century. Jefferson's policies of territorial expansion, as well as his emphasis on liberty and the agrarian ideal, helped solidify his place as one of the most celebrated founding fathers. Madison, too, is remembered for his role in drafting the Constitution and Bill of Rights, both of which enshrined the values of individual freedom and limited government. His vision of a balanced federal system, with a separation of powers between the branches of government and the states, has had a profound and lasting impact on the structure of American government. Madison's alignment with Jefferson's belief in states' rights and his opposition to Hamilton's centralization of power were central to the formation of the Democratic-Republican Party. Despite these ideological divides, Hamilton's contributions to the American system of government were undeniable. His creation of a national financial system, including the establishment of the National Bank and the assumption of state debts, laid the groundwork for the United States to become a strong economic power. His advocacy for a powerful central government and a stable financial system made the U.S. a credible player on the world stage, and his ideas continue to influence American politics and policy today. While the Federalist system Hamilton envisioned may not have fully prevailed in the long term, his efforts in shaping the nation's financial structure remain foundational. Hamilton's legacy is often viewed through a more pragmatic lens than that of Jefferson or Madison. While Jefferson's agrarian republic and Madison's advocacy for limited government defined the vision of American democracy for much of the 19th century, Hamilton's policies established the institutional frameworks that allowed the United States to prosper. His belief in a strong central government, a unified financial system, and a robust economy set the stage for the nation's rise as a global economic power in the 19th and 20th centuries. Ultimately, Hamilton's contributions, though sometimes overshadowed by the populist ideals of other founders, are integral to understanding the complex nature of the United States' early history. He was a visionary, a pragmatist, and a man who understood that the success of the new republic depended on more than just democratic ideals. It required a system of governance capable of managing a complex and diverse nation. Hamilton's vision for a strong federal government, a unified financial system, and economic stability has endured, leaving an indelible mark on the history of the United States. Alexander Hamilton's contributions to the political and economic systems of the United States are vast, and the legacy he left behind continues to shape the nation today. While Hamilton's time in public life was short, the systems he helped create and the policies he championed remain foundational to the U.S. government and economy. His vision of a strong, centralized government, a unified financial system, and an industrialized economy has influenced American policy for centuries. One of Hamilton's most significant contributions to the country's political system was his work in drafting the U.S. Constitution and advocating for its ratification. As a delegate at the Constitutional Convention, Hamilton was one of the strongest proponents of a robust federal government. His vision for the new nation included a strong executive branch, a unified financial system, and the establishment of a central government capable of regulating commerce, defending the nation, and managing its finances. His ideas on the balance of power between the federal government and the states were instrumental in shaping the Constitution's framework. The Federalist Papers, a series of essays written by Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, played a key role in securing the ratification of the Constitution. In these essays, Hamilton argued for the necessity of a strong central government to prevent factionalism and maintain national unity. He also emphasized the importance of a strong executive branch to ensure decisive action in times of crisis. Hamilton's contributions to the Federalist Papers helped clarify the reasoning behind the Constitution's provisions and convinced many of the need for a stronger federal government. Hamilton's work as the first Secretary of the Treasury further solidified his influence on the US political and economic systems. His financial policies, particularly the creation of a national bank, the assumption of state debts, and the establishment of a national debt structure, laid the groundwork for the country's financial future. These policies helped stabilize the US economy and ensured that the country would have the means to meet its financial obligations. Hamilton's economic vision, which centered on a unified financial system and the regulation of commerce, created the framework for the country's future economic growth. The creation of the Bank of the United States in 1791 was one of Hamilton's most enduring achievements. The bank was established to serve as a depository for federal funds, issue currency, and regulate the nation's money supply. By consolidating the country's financial operations under a single institution, Hamilton believed the US government could more effectively manage its finances and promote economic stability. Although the bank was controversial, especially among those who opposed a strong federal government, its creation marked a turning point in the development of the US financial system. Hamilton's economic policies were also instrumental in establishing the United States as a credible player in the international economy. By stabilizing the nation's finances and creating a unified financial system, Hamilton helped ensure that the US could secure loans and establish trade relationships with foreign powers. This economic stability laid the foundation for the United States to expand its influence in the global economy in the 19th and 20th centuries. Another key element of Hamilton's economic vision was his support for industrialization. Unlike his political opponents who favored an agrarian economy, Hamilton believed that the future of the United States lay in its ability to develop a strong manufacturing sector. He saw industrialization as essential to the nation's economic independence, as it would reduce the country's reliance on foreign goods and create a self-sustaining economy. Hamilton's vision for American industry was reflected in his report on manufactures, in which he argued that the federal government should provide incentives for domestic manufacturing and promote the development of key industries. Hamilton's vision of an industrialized America was not fully realized during his lifetime, but it provided the intellectual groundwork for the country's later industrial expansion. His belief in a strong, centralized government capable of promoting economic growth and supporting key industries influenced policymakers throughout the 19th century, particularly during the era of rapid industrialization in the late 1800s. Hamilton's ideas on economic regulation and industrial development continue to resonate in American political thought, especially in discussions about the role of government in promoting economic growth and managing the economy. Hamilton's political and economic systems were not without their critics. Thomas Jefferson and his allies, who championed a more decentralized form of government, strongly opposed many of Hamilton's policies. They believed that a strong central government would undermine the autonomy of the states and infringe upon individual liberties. Jefferson and his followers also opposed Hamilton's vision of a strong executive branch, viewing it as a potential threat to democracy. Despite these differences, Hamilton's policies ultimately prevailed, and his vision for a strong federal government became a defining feature of the US political system. The tension between Hamilton's vision and Jefferson's agrarian ideals laid the foundation for the rise of political parties in the United States. The Federalist Party, led by Hamilton, advocated for a strong central government, a national bank, and an industrialized economy, while the Democratic Republican Party, led by Jefferson, championed states' rights, an agrarian economy, and a limited federal government. This ideological divide between Hamilton and Jefferson formed the basis for the political party system that would shape American politics for generations. Hamilton's legacy also extended to the role of the president. His belief in a strong executive branch, capable of taking decisive action, influenced the development of the presidency in the years following his death. Hamilton's vision of a powerful centralized government was reflected in the growing authority of the executive branch, particularly during the presidencies of George Washington and his successors. The expansion of executive power in the 19th and 20th centuries can be traced back to Hamilton's ideas about the role of the president and the need for a strong national government. Hamilton's impact on the United States was profound, shaping both the political and economic systems of the young republic. His contributions to the nation's financial system, his advocacy for a strong federal government, and his vision of an industrialized economy laid the groundwork for the United States to become a global economic power. Though his Federalist Party eventually gave way to other political movements, Hamilton's ideas continue to shape American politics and policy to this day. As the United States evolved from its early struggles as a new nation to its rise as a global economic power, Alexander Hamilton's vision for the country remained remarkably relevant. Though the political landscape shifted significantly throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, many of Hamilton's ideas continued to influence American political, economic, and legal thought. His commitment to a strong central government, a unified financial system, and economic growth through industry and commerce laid the foundation for many of the country's subsequent achievements. Hamilton's vision for a strong federal government was a critical component of his legacy. His belief that a centralized authority was necessary to manage national defense, regulate commerce, and ensure economic stability became central to the functioning of the U.S. government. Although Hamilton's Federalist Party eventually faded, his ideas about the role of the federal government continued to shape the development of American politics. The U.S. Constitution, with its system of checks and balances, was rooted in Hamilton's belief that a strong central government was necessary for the survival of the nation. Over time, Hamilton's emphasis on a powerful executive branch with the authority to act decisively in times of crisis became increasingly influential. As the U.S. grew and faced challenges such as the Civil War, World Wars, and the rise of global competition, the role of the president expanded. Many of the executive powers granted by the Constitution were exercised in ways that reflected Hamilton's understanding of the need for national unity and effective governance. From Abraham Lincoln's leadership during the Civil War to Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal and beyond, presidents often invoke the idea of strong centralized authority to respond to national crises. Hamilton's belief in the importance of a stable financial system also laid the groundwork for the U.S. economy's success. His creation of a national bank, along with his vision for the country's financial infrastructure, allowed the United States to build a creditworthy reputation and manage its national debt. In the years following Hamilton's death, many of his financial policies were preserved and built upon by future leaders. The creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, for instance, reflected Hamilton's belief in the need for a central institution to manage the nation's money supply and regulate financial institutions. Hamilton's emphasis on economic growth through industry and commerce was also an essential part of his vision for the United States. While Hamilton's industrial agenda was not fully realized during his lifetime, it eventually became a driving force behind the nation's economic development. In the late 19th century, the United States saw rapid industrialization. With the growth of factories, railroads, and manufacturing industries, Hamilton's belief that a strong, diversified economy was essential to the country's independence and prosperity was borne out as the U.S. transformed into an industrial powerhouse, particularly during the Gilded Age and the early 20th century. One of the most important ways Hamilton's ideas continue to shape the United States today is in the ongoing debate over the role of government in economic affairs. Hamilton's vision of a strong interventionist government that could regulate commerce, manage the nation's finances, and promote industry has had a lasting impact on American economic policy. His belief that government should play a central role in ensuring national economic stability has influenced everything from Roosevelt's New Deal programs to modern-day debates over infrastructure spending and economic stimulus. Hamilton's ideas have also remained a point of reference in the discussions about federalism and the balance of power between the federal government and the states. While Jefferson's vision of states' rights dominated much of the early political landscape, Hamilton's emphasis on a strong national government has continued to influence legal and political debates throughout U.S. history. From the establishment of national institutions like the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve to the expansion of federal authority during times of crisis, Hamilton's ideas have been invoked to justify the centralization of power in Washington, D.C. Despite the fact that Hamilton's Federalist Party disappeared, the fundamental tenets of his vision, economic centralization, national unity, and a strong executive branch, continue to inform the policies of both major political parties. In the 21st century, the debate between those who advocate for a more centralized government and those who support greater state autonomy mirrors the debates between Hamilton and Jefferson that dominated the early years of the Republic. Hamilton's ideas about the economy, government, and national identity continue to resonate in the political discourse, providing a framework for understanding the role of government in modern America. Perhaps one of the most enduring aspects of Hamilton's legacy is his belief in the importance of education, self-improvement, and ambition. Hamilton's own rise from a poor, illegitimate child in the Caribbean to a central figure in the founding of the United States is a testament to his determination and intellectual prowess. His commitment to education and intellectual development was reflected in his involvement in the creation of the U.S. financial system and his contributions to the Federalist Papers. Hamilton's story continues to inspire individuals, particularly immigrants, who see in him the possibility of achieving greatness through hard work, perseverance, and dedication to the common good. Hamilton's life, ideas, and legacy remain essential to understanding the history of the United States. His contributions to the nation's political, economic, and legal systems provided a framework for the country's success and continued growth. His belief in a strong, centralized government, a unified financial system, and the importance of economic development laid the foundation for the United States to become a global power. While Hamilton's political vision may not have been fully realized in his lifetime, his ideas continue to shape American thought, policy, and identity. As we reach the final segment of our journey through Alexander Hamilton's life, it is clear that his place in American history is as complex as it is significant. While his tenure in public office was relatively short and his life was tragically cut short by the infamous duel with Aaron Burr, Hamilton's impact on the United States is undeniable. His legacy, shaped by both admiration and controversy, continues to resonate in modern American political, economic, and cultural life. Hamilton's story is one of extraordinary ambition, intellectual brilliance, and unyielding commitment to the idea of a strong, unified nation. Born an illegitimate child on the island of Nevis in the Caribbean, Hamilton's rise to prominence was a testament to his remarkable intellect and determination. Orphaned at a young age and without the advantages of wealth or status, Hamilton's early life was one of hardship and struggle. Yet, through sheer willpower and ambition, he was able to transcend his beginnings and become one of the most influential figures in the early years of the United States. Hamilton's vision for the United States was grounded in the belief that a strong federal government was essential to the survival and prosperity of the young republic. His advocacy for a powerful executive, a unified financial system, and the creation of a national bank laid the foundation for the country's economic success and political stability. His ideas, though controversial at the time, ultimately became integral to the structure of the United States government. Through his leadership and policies as the first Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton helped establish the financial institutions and economic systems that allowed the United States to thrive. But Hamilton's legacy is not without its contradictions. While he championed the cause of liberty and freedom, his views on slavery were far from progressive by today's standards. Hamilton's personal opposition to the expansion of slavery and his support for the abolition of the international slave trade in 1808 contrasted with the deeply ingrained economic and political system of slavery in the southern states. His involvement in the founding of the United States, which was itself a nation built on principles of freedom and equality, is complicated by his participation in a system that enslaved millions of African Americans. Moreover, Hamilton's vision for a centralized government, while central to the creation of the nation's financial system and legal framework, did not align with the more democratic and decentralized vision of his political opponents, particularly Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson's belief in the power of the states and the virtues of agrarianism stood in contrast to Hamilton's vision of a strong industrialized republic. While Hamilton's financial system helped establish the country as an economic power, it also created a legacy of division, with ongoing debates about the balance of power between the federal government and the states. Hamilton's contributions to American politics, however, cannot be understated. His advocacy for the Constitution, his authorship of the Federalist Papers, and his establishment of the National Bank set the stage for the United States to become a powerful and stable nation. His ideas on government and finance influenced future generations of American politicians, and his vision for a unified, industrialized economy has continued to shape American economic policy to this day. In the decades following his death, Hamilton's vision of a strong central government was adopted by future generations of leaders, from the administrations of Presidents John Adams and Abraham Lincoln to the economic policies of the 20th century. His legacy has been recognized and celebrated in various ways, particularly in modern interpretations of his life, such as Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton, which brought his story to a new audience and reinforced his place as one of the key figures in American history. Hamilton's influence on the United States has also extended beyond the political realm. His intellectual contributions to American thought, particularly in the areas of law, government, and economics, continue to be studied and debated by scholars and policymakers. His work in shaping the financial system, promoting industrialization, and establishing the groundwork for a strong executive branch has had a lasting impact on American political philosophy and governance. Furthermore, Hamilton's story has become a symbol of the American dream. His rise from a poor, illegitimate child in the Caribbean to one of the most powerful figures in the United States is a testament to the opportunities available in a country founded on the principles of liberty and equality. His life serves as a reminder that, even in the face of adversity, individuals can shape the future through hard work, intellect, and ambition. Ultimately, Alexander Hamilton's place in history is secure. His intellectual contributions, his vision for the country's financial system, and his role in the creation of the US government make him one of the most important figures in American history. Though his life was cut short and his political views were often contentious, Hamilton's influence on the United States has endured through the centuries. His legacy, both as a statesman and as a visionary, continues to shape the trajectory of the nation he helped to create. As we reflect on Hamilton's life and legacy, it is clear that his story is one of complexity, ambition, and enduring relevance. Hamilton's vision for the United States as a strong, unified nation with a stable financial system and a powerful central government helped lay the foundation for the country's rise as a global power. His contributions to American politics, economics, and governance are immeasurable, and his place in history remains one of both admiration and controversy, a testament to the challenges and complexities of building a nation. As we conclude this exploration of Alexander Hamilton's life, we're reminded of the lasting impact one individual can have on the course of history. Hamilton's contributions to the formation of the United States, both in terms of its government and its financial system, are foundational to the country's development and success. His ambition, vision, and determination to build a strong, unified nation continue to resonate through the centuries, influencing political and economic policy to this day. Hamilton's story is not just the story of one man, it is the story of the ideals that help shape the United States. His life was marked by both brilliance and controversy, by profound achievements and personal struggles, but above all, by a commitment to creating a government that could secure the liberty and prosperity of its people. While his vision was not always popular, and his legacy has been subject to ongoing debate, there is no doubt that Hamilton's role in the birth of the American Republic remains indelible. In reflecting on Hamilton's legacy, we see the complex reality of the founding of the United States, a country built on ideals of liberty, democracy, and freedom, yet grappling with the contradictions and challenges inherent in those ideals. Hamilton's influence, both in life and in death, reminds us that the path to greatness is rarely straightforward, and that the choices of a few individuals can shape the destiny of a nation. Hamilton's contributions to the American financial system, his defense of a strong central government, and his belief in the importance of a cohesive and prosperous nation continue to inspire, challenge, and inform the way we understand and navigate the complexities of modern American politics and governance. His legacy, embodied in the institutions he helped create, the policies he championed, and the ideals he pursued, is a testament to the enduring relevance of his vision. As we conclude this narrative of Alexander Hamilton's life, we are left with a deeper understanding of his pivotal role in shaping the United States. Hamilton's legacy is not just one of financial policies and political structures, it is one of ambition, vision, and the unyielding pursuit of a better future for the nation. His story is a reminder that the fight for a more perfect union is ongoing, and that each generation must continue to build upon the work of those who came before. Thank you for joining this exploration of Alexander Hamilton's life and legacy. As we reflect on the lessons of his story, we're reminded that the journey of creating a just and prosperous society is ever evolving, and that the ideals of liberty, justice, and the common good continue to guide the American experiment.